Story 1. This story is titled, My Brother Who Stole My Wife. 4 years ago, finally came home for a visit. He mocked me with my ex until my dad dropped the truth that wrecked them. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I've been trying to write this post for a while now, but it's not easy putting everything into words. I guess I should start from the beginning, back when things were normal and I actually thought I had a good life. So a year ago, I, 32 male, was living what I thought was pretty much the perfect life with my wife Sarah, 30 female. We'd been married for 5 years at that point, had our own house. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, you know. We even had this amazing Maine Coon cat named Lumi, who Sarah gave me for our first anniversary. Man, that cat is something else. Pure white fur, super intelligent, and definitely thinks she runs the household. Let's be real, she does. I work in software development, not making crazy Silicon Valley money or anything, but enough that we were comfortable. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher at this really nice school about 20 minutes from our place. She was really good at her job too. Like, parents would specifically request to have their kids in her class. Every day she'd come home with these hilarious stories about what the kids did or said. We'd sit at dinner and just laugh about all the weird things that happened in her classroom. We had this whole routine that just worked, you know? Mornings were our thing. We'd get up early and have coffee together before work. Sarah would do this thing where she'd steal my coffee when she thought I wasn't looking, even though she had her own right in front of her. Said mine always tasted better for some reason. Weekends were for sleeping in, well, trying to. Lumi had other ideas about breakfast time, making pancakes and just doing normal couple stuff. My older brother Jake, 35 male, was around a lot too. He worked at this big investment firm downtown, always showing up in these expensive suits and that stupid Mercedes he wouldn't shut up about. Mom and Dad basically thought he was God's gift to the family business. Dad owns this pretty successful construction company that Jake helped manage the finances for. Everyone was always talking about how successful Jake was, how smart he was with money, how he was really making something of himself. I started noticing the signs, but I didn't piece them together at the time. Jake would randomly stop by our house when he knew I was working late, always finding an excuse to be around. At family dinners, he somehow always ended up sitting next to Sarah. Then there were the little comments, subtle digs about my house, my car, or my job. Never outright insults, just these offhand remarks about how he could never settle for my lifestyle. But you don't expect that kind of thing from your own brother, right? And every time he said something, Sarah would just roll her eyes and cuddle closer to me, so I figured everything was fine. Sarah and I had all these plans we were working on. We'd been saving up for a bigger house, talking about having kids soon. She'd already picked out names, wanted to name a boy after her grandfather, stuff like that. We even started looking at houses with bigger yards because Sarah was convinced Lumi needed more space to express herself. Pretty sure Lumi just wanted more birds to watch through the windows. Man, Lumi was so excited every time we went house hunting. Sarah would hold up these cat beds or toys at different stores and ask, "What do you think of this for your new room, Lumi?" Like the cat was going to give design advice or something. But that was Sarah, always including Lumi in everything like she was our kid. I really thought we had it all figured out. Good jobs, nice house, plans for the future, amazing cat. What more could you want, right? Sarah seemed happy too. We still did date nights every month, still cuddled on the couch watching movies with Lumi sprawled across both our laps. She still kissed me goodbye every morning and sent me random texts during the day just to say she loved me. I know this probably sounds super boring to most people. No crazy parties or exotic vacations or anything. Just normal life stuff. But I liked it. I liked coming home to Sarah and Lumi, liked our little routines, liked planning our future together. Liked that Sarah seemed to want the same things I did. Yeah, Jake would make comments sometimes about how I needed to think bigger or take more risks, like him. But I had everything I wanted. But funny, how fast things can change, how people you trust completely can just, yeah. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That was my life a year ago. Normal, happy, stable, the calm before everything went to hell, I guess. So remember how I mentioned those monthly date nights with Sarah? We had this favorite Italian place called Romano's. Nothing super fancy, but the food was amazing, and they knew us there. Like the owner Mario would always save our table and bring out this special garlic bread Sarah loved. That night started normal enough. I got to Romano's early because I wanted to surprise Sarah with flowers. She'd had a rough week at work dealing with some angry parent. I remember being kind of excited because I'd also found this little cat-shaped keychain that looked exactly like Lumi, and I knew Sarah would love it. I was walking to our usual table when I saw them. Jake and Sarah sitting in this corner booth. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. Like, maybe they ran into each other? Maybe they were planning something for my birthday? But nah, the way they were sitting, how close they were. Jake's hand was on hers, and Sarah was looking at him with this expression I used to think was just for me. I just stood there, locked in place, watching my brother and my wife look at each other the way she used to look at me. They didn't even notice me at first, just sitting there, all cozy, laughing about something. Then Sarah looked up and saw me standing there with these stupid flowers in my hand. You guys want to know what she did? She smiled. Not even an embarrassed smile or a guilty smile. Just this casual smile, like she'd been waiting for me to find out. And Jake? This piece of work actually said, and I swear I'm not making this up, "Oh, hey, bro. We were wondering when you'd figure it out." Like this was some kind of game or something. I just stood there for a minute, probably looking like an idiot. Then Jake goes, "Come on, you had to know Sarah was too good for your lifestyle." And that's when it really sunk in. This wasn't just about Sarah. This wasn't even just about betrayal. This was about disrespect. It wasn't enough for Jake to have more money, a flashier car, or dad's approval. He had to take my wife. And not just take her, he wanted me to see it. To know that he could step into my life, take what was mine, and win. He wasn't just trying to steal Sarah, he was trying to erase me. My fist clenched so tight I felt my nails dig into my palms. My own brother, the guy who was supposed to have my back, had looked at my life and decided he was entitled to it. And Sarah? She didn't just let it happen. She went along with it. Like I was nothing. Like I never mattered. Every guy knows there's a line you don't cross. You don't mess with your brother's girl. You don't tear down your own blood just to prove a point. But Jake never believed in lines. Not when it came to me. I'm not proud of what I did next, but in that moment, I completely lost it. The betrayal, the smugness, the way they sat there so casually like they hadn't just destroyed my life, it all hit me at once. I don't even remember what I yelled, just that my voice was shaking with rage. My hands were clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. But it wasn't enough. I needed to do something, so I swiped my arm across the table, knocking over their fancy bottle of wine, some overpriced crap Jake probably bought with company money. Glass shattered, red wine spilled across the table like blood, and suddenly the whole restaurant was staring. Jake shot up from his seat, acting all indignant, like I was the problem here. He stepped toward me, running his mouth about how I was overreacting, how Sarah had chosen him, like that made it okay. Something in me just snapped. I lunged at him, shoving him so hard he stumbled into a chair. For a second, he actually looked scared. But before I could do anything else, the staff was between us, pulling me back, telling me to calm down, like I was the one who had started this. And Sarah? She didn't flinch, didn't defend me, didn't even look guilty. She just sat there, arms crossed, lips pressed in that irritated way she did when I forgot to take the trash out. Like I was ruining her evening, like this wasn't my entire life crashing down around me. That's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. Neither of them were. I left and drove home. Couldn't even think straight. Lumi knew something was wrong the second I walked in. She's scary smart like that. Just followed me around the house meowing while I paced and tried to figure out what to do. Sarah didn't come home that night, or the next night, or ever again actually. Went straight to Jake's place. Guess they'd been planning this for a while. The next day I got these texts that I still have saved, because sometimes I need to remind myself I'm not crazy. Jake, look man, these things happen. Sarah and I have a real connection. You're my brother and all, but you gotta admit she deserves better than your basic 9-to-5 life. No hard feelings? Sarah, I was going to tell you eventually. Jake and I just clicked. He has ambition, you know. Goals. All you care about is your little programming job and that cat. I need more than that. Then they both started calling and texting, trying to explain how they didn't mean for this to happen, and how sometimes love just finds you, and all this other BS. Jake even had the nerve to say, bros before hoes doesn't apply when it's true love, right? I didn't respond to any of it. Just sat on my couch with Lumi in my lap, trying to process how my life had just completely fallen apart. The worst part wasn't that I lost Sarah. It wasn't even that Jake had her. It was that I felt small, like I'd let this happen, like I wasn't enough, not for Sarah, not for my own family. And that feeling? That burned more than anything. The next few weeks were a mess. Sarah came by when I was at work and took a bunch of her stuff. She tried to take Lumi too, but my neighbor, shout out to Mrs. Chen, real MVP, saw what was happening and called me. I rushed home and Sarah was literally trying to get Lumi into a carrier while my cat was having none of it. I lost it again. Told Sarah she could take whatever else she wanted, but Lumi was my cat. Her anniversary gift to me, registered in my name, all vet records in my name. She actually tried to argue that she picked Lumi out, so technically the cat was hers. Yeah, no, that was my line in the sand. Meanwhile, Jake kept showing up at my work, trying to explain things, saying stuff like, "You'll thank me later," and Sarah was always meant for someone like me. Someone like him. What does that even mean? A lying, cheating dirtbag who steals his brother's wife? The worst part? Some of my family actually took their side. Mom was upset but kept saying stuff like, "Well, you know how Jake is." Like that made it okay. Dad was more concerned about how this would affect the business than how I was doing. Only my sister Katie straight up told Jake he was dead to her. But even with Katie in my corner, I wasn't prepared for what came next. The divorce was a complete nightmare. Sarah hired this aggressive lawyer who tried to take everything, wanted half my savings, my car, which I bought before we even met, and even tried to argue she deserved money for contributing to my career growth because she supported me emotionally while I got promotions. Like, what? The worst part was how they tried to get Lumi. Sarah's lawyer actually argued in court that since Sarah picked out Lumi, she had emotional ownership, or some garbage like that. The judge shut that down real quick when I showed all the vet records, registration papers, and proof that Lumi was a gift to me. Should have seen Sarah's face when she realized she couldn't take my cat. First time her perfect little act cracked. Jake was there at every court meeting, sitting right behind Sarah like some kind of bodyguard in his expensive suits. He kept trying to talk to me in the hallways, saying stuff like, "Come on, man, let's be reasonable here," and "You're still my brother, we can work this out." Like he actually thought I'd want anything to do with him after what he did. While all this was happening, they started posting all over Instagram and Facebook about their amazing love story and how sometimes the heart wants what it wants. Jake even posted this long thing about how true love means taking risks and tagged Sarah in it. Made me want to throw my phone across the room. Lumi actually knocked it out of my hands once when I was getting too worked up reading their stuff, like she knew it wasn't good for me. The divorce finally got settled after 2 months of back and forth. I kept the house. I bought it before marriage with my own savings, my car, and obviously Lumi. Sarah got her car and whatever she'd already taken from the house. She tried to argue for more, but her lawyer finally told her she didn't have a case. Here's where it starts getting good, though. Remember how Jake worked at Dad's construction company, handling all the finances? Well, right after the divorce was final, they posted all these vacation photos from the Maldives. The funny thing? Dad had been noticing some weird numbers in the company accounts. Nothing major at first, just little things that didn't add up. But these vacation posts made him look closer. Why? Because the trip they were bragging about cost more than Jake's yearly salary. Meanwhile, I was actually doing okay. I stopped visiting the family house. I focused on work, got a promotion because turns out when you're not dealing with a cheating wife and backstabbing brother, you can actually get stuff done. Lumi and I got into this routine. Morning cuddles, work from home some days. She loves lying on my keyboard during Zoom meetings. Evening walks around the neighborhood where she follows me like a dog. My sister Katie started coming over more too. She's the only one in the family who completely cut Jake off. She and Lumi became best buddies. Pretty sure my cat likes her better than me sometimes. Katie would bring over takeout and we'd just hang out, her playing with Lumi while telling me all the family gossip I was missing. That's when we started hearing stuff about Jake at work. Nothing concrete at first, just whispers about numbers not matching up. Missing receipts, weird transfers. Dad wasn't saying anything, but Katie noticed he was staying late at the office a lot, having meetings with accountants. Sarah wasn't looking so happy in their social media posts anymore either. The designer clothes posts slowed down, the fancy dinner pics stopped. Jake was still posting about living large and success mindset, but something seemed off. Then one day, while I was working from home, I got this call from Dad. His voice was different, serious in a way I'd never heard before. "Family meeting tomorrow," he said. "Your brother will be there." I tried to say no, but Dad cut me off. "This isn't a request, and trust me, you want to be there for this." I really didn't want to go. Hadn't been to my parents' house since Jake and Sarah announced their engagement 3 months after my divorce was final. Yeah, they moved that fast. But Dad wasn't taking no for an answer. That morning was weird. Lumi somehow knew something was up. She wouldn't leave me alone while I was getting ready, kept following me around meowing. Walking into that house was, man, I don't know how to describe it. You know that feeling when you're about to get into a fight and your whole body is just tensed up? Like that, but worse. Jake's stupid Mercedes was in the driveway, the one he always bragged about, parked crooked like he'd been in a hurry. They were already there when I walked in. Jake and Sarah sitting on the couch like they owned the place. Jake in another expensive suit, Sarah decked out in designer everything. The second I walked in, Jake started with his usual crap. "Hey, ugly, still driving that Toyota?" He smirked. His fiancée added, "How's the cat? Still your only companion? Real mature, right?" I clenched my jaw, inhaling deeply through my nose. I had spent years preparing for this moment, convincing myself that if I ever saw them again, I wouldn't let them get to me, that I had grown beyond their petty jabs. But I was about to get up and leave because it didn't feel right when Dad walked in. Now, you gotta understand my dad. He's not a loud guy, doesn't yell or anything. But when he wants attention, you shut up. He's got this way of just commanding a room. He sat down at his desk, the same desk where he used to help us with homework when we were kids, and pulled out this thick folder. Just set it there between us all. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Dad looked straight at Jake and said, "Want to tell me about the Anderson contract?" Jake's face did this weird thing, like he tried to keep smirking but couldn't quite manage it. "What about it?" Dad pulled out some papers. Interesting numbers here. Contract was for $2.4 million, but our books only show $1.8 million received. Want to explain that? Sarah shifted in her seat. Jake waved his hand like it was nothing. Probably just a clerical error. "I'll have accounting look into it." "Already did," Dad said. Started laying out more papers. Just like I looked into the Wilson project, and about 20 other contracts over the past year. The room got really quiet. Jake's face was doing that twitchy thing it does when he's nervous. Sarah was clutching her designer purse so hard. "You really thought I wouldn't notice?" Dad asked. He wasn't yelling. Almost wish he had been. This calm voice was way worse. "You thought you could steal from your own family?" Jake tried to laugh it off. "Dad, come on. This is ridiculous. I've made this company more money than—" "By stealing from it?" Dad cut him off. "By creating fake accounts? By skimming money from every major contract?" He pulled out his laptop, turned it around. "By paying for your lifestyle with company funds?" The screen showed all these transactions. The Maldives trip, Sarah's shopping sprees, Jake's Mercedes payments, all paid for with company money through some complicated system of fake accounts and doctored invoices. Sarah started to say something, but Dad held up his hand. "Oh, I know about your involvement too. The separate account in your name? The one getting regular transfers from our business accounts?" "Yeah, found that too." I just sat there watching it all unfold. Part of me wanted to laugh. All those times Jake bragged about his financial genius and business skills, turned out he was just stealing from Dad the whole time. Jake tried one more time. "Dad, I can explain everything. We can work this out. The company's doing better than ever." I leaned back in my chair, watching him sweat through his overpriced suit. This was the guy who stole my wife? The guy who spent years looking down on me? I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. "You thought you were the man, huh? Funny how that worked out." Jake's face twitched like he wanted to say something, but he had nothing. Because for the first time in his life, there was no way to talk his way out of it. "Because of the contracts you didn't steal from?" Dad asked. Then he picked up another paper. "But we're not done. Want to tell me about Mom's medical fund?" Now, quick background. Our mom passed away a few months before Jake and Sarah started their thing. She'd been sick for a while, needed lots of expensive treatments. Dad had set up this special fund for her care, was putting like $5,000 a month into it. Jake was supposed to handle all the payments since he was so good with money. Dad pulled out these bank statements, showed how all that money that was supposed to be for Mom's care, never made it to the hospital. Instead, it went straight into Jake's personal accounts. While Mom was struggling in the hospital, Jake was using her medical money to buy himself fancy suits and take Sarah on expensive dates. I felt sick, like physically sick. The affair was bad enough. But this? Using Mom's medical money? That's like a whole different level of messed up. Jake started stammering, trying to make excuses. There was a mix-up with the accounts. I was going to pay it back. The treatments weren't working anyway. Sarah just sat there, her face getting whiter and whiter. Guess she didn't know about this part. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Hard to tell with her. Dad wasn't done, though. He pulled up security camera footage on his laptop from some fancy hotel downtown. Timestamp showed it was from the night Mom. You know, there's Jake and Sarah all dressed up, laughing, dancing, while Mom was in the hospital, while I was sitting with her, while Dad was trying to reach Jake to tell him to come say goodbye. The footage was like a minute long, but felt like forever. When it ended, nobody said anything for what felt like hours. I felt sick into my stomach. I couldn't believe how far my brother would go in his betrayal. Then, Jake tried one last time. Dad, come on. I'm your son. Your successful son. The one who... the one who stole from his dying mother? Dad asked. His voice was so quiet it was scary. The one who embezzled from the family business? That successful son? Then Dad picked up this other envelope. The one he'd had on his desk the whole time. This is my will, he said. Want to know what's in it? Jake tried to smile, but it looked wrong. Like his face wasn't working right. Dad, let's not be dramatic. We can work this out. I'll pay everything back. Everything goes to your brother, Dad said. Just like that. The company. The house. All of it. Sarah jumped up then. You can't do that. We'll fight it. We'll get lawyers. Dad actually laughed. Not a happy laugh. More like a go ahead and try laugh. You mean the lawyers I already talked to? The ones who have copies of all the evidence? The FBI agents who are very interested in all this fraud? Jake's face went from red to white so fast it was almost funny. Sarah started doing this weird breathing thing, like she couldn't get enough air. You're bluffing, Jake said, but his voice was shaking. You wouldn't do this to your own son? Dad stood up. He's not a tall guy, but somehow he seemed huge right then. You did this to yourself. Both of you did. Now get out of my house. Sarah grabbed her purse and ran, like literally ran out the door. Jake just sat there for a minute, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Then he looked at me, actually tried to say something, but Dad cut him off. If you ever come near this family again, Dad said, I'll make sure you spend the next 20 years in prison. Now get out. Jake left. I stayed sitting there, trying to process everything. Dad just started putting all the papers back in their folders, calm as could be, like he hadn't just destroyed Jake's whole fake life in less than an hour. When I got home that night, Lumi was waiting by the door like she always does. Jumped right into my lap when I sat down, purring like crazy. I felt somehow my rights are coming back, but the fallout was harsh. The first thing that changed was Jake's job, obviously. Dad didn't just fire him. He had the company lawyers report everything to the authorities. Turns out stealing company money and messing with medical funds is pretty illegal. Who knew, right? Jake tried to play it off at first, kept posting on LinkedIn about exciting new opportunities and time for a change. But everyone at the company knew what really happened. Word gets around fast in the construction business, and Dad didn't try to hide why Jake was gone. The Mercedes disappeared first. Guess when you're buying cars with stolen money? The bank doesn't let you keep them. Sarah posted this long rant on Facebook about how they were choosing to simplify their lifestyle, and how material things don't matter when you have true love. Yeah, sure. Their fancy house was next. They'd bought it right after getting together, way bigger than they could actually afford, but Jake had been stealing enough to cover it. Now, bank took it back. They had to move into some small apartment across town. The real fun started when the FBI got involved. Remember all that evidence Dad had? Yeah, turned out the feds were very interested in how Jake had been moving money around. They showed up at his new apartment, with a search warrant and everything. My sister Katie, still the best sister ever, works at a coffee shop near their apartment and saw the whole thing. Said Jake was trying to argue with the FBI agents while Sarah just stood there crying. But she got it all on video. Not posting it here for legal reasons, but man, watching Jake try to explain why he had all these fake company documents in his apartment was pretty satisfying. Their friends started disappearing too. All those people who'd sided with them during the affair, who'd posted supportive comments about their true love, suddenly they were nowhere to be found. Funny how people disappear when you can't buy them expensive dinners anymore. About a month after everything went down, Sarah suddenly reached out, sending this long, rambling message about how she never knew about the stealing and was just as much a victim as anyone. By then, word had gotten around that I was named in Dad's will, inheriting a significant share of the business. And suddenly, the same woman who had torn my life apart wanted to talk. She didn't say it outright, but the subtext was obvious. I messed up, but maybe we can work things out? I didn't even bother responding, but I did send her a picture of Lumi sleeping on my desk at the company office. Yeah, Dad made me head of finance after Jake left. My cat's living a better life than both of them now, and honestly, that feels like perfect justice. But fate? Fate had its own sense of humor. A few days later, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown, except I wasn't alone. I was with someone new, and she was everything Sarah wasn't. Sarah froze when she saw us. Her eyes flicked between me and the woman laughing at something I said, and for the first time since she left, she looked unsure. I made eye contact with her, held it for just a second, then turned back to my date like she didn't exist. That's when I knew. She finally got it. She wasn't special. She was just a mistake I grew past. Then Jake got arrested 2 weeks ago. Looking at serious time, like decades. His lawyer keeps trying to make deals, but the evidence is pretty solid. Turns out Jake wasn't as smart with computers as he thought. The FBI found everything. Sarah filed for divorce the day after Jake's arrest, posted this whole thing on Facebook about being betrayed and how she was healing from trauma. Conveniently forgot to mention all the designer stuff she bought with stolen money. She's moved back in with her parents. Karma's funny like that. About 2 weeks after Jake went to jail, I got this call from a number I didn't recognize. Almost didn't answer it, but something told me I should. It was from the county jail. Jake's voice was different. Gone was that smug, better-than-you tone. He sounded small, broken even. First thing he said was, "I really messed up, didn't I?" I just sat there, petting Lumi, who was in my lap as usual, trying to figure out what to say. Finally went with, "Yeah, you did." That's when he started crying. Actually crying. Said he was sorry, that he never meant for things to go this far, that he just got caught up in trying to prove he was successful. Started talking about Mom, how he thinks about her every night in his cell. I let him talk. Pretty sure he'd been practicing this speech for days. When he finally finished, you know what I said? The same thing he said to me that night at Romano's. "Well, this is awkward." Then I hung up. His lawyer called the next day. Tried to convince me to speak up for Jake at his sentencing. Said something about family bonds and second chances. I just laughed and hung up again. Dad's lawyer says Jake's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The fraud stuff was bad enough, but stealing from Mom's medical fund? That's what really got the prosecutors angry. Turns out judges don't like it when you steal money meant for your dying mother's care. Sarah tried to play innocent at first, changed her last name back, deleted all their photos together, told everyone who'd listen that she had no idea about the stealing. But the FBI found emails where she was helping Jake move money around. Her trial's next month, and from what the lawyers say, she's not looking at a fun time either. Meanwhile, my life's actually gotten pretty good. The company's doing better than ever. Amazing what happens when nobody's stealing millions from it. Dad's been teaching me everything about running things, and turns out I actually like it. Numbers make sense when they're real. Bought a new house too. Nothing crazy fancy like Jake and Sarah's place, but it's perfect for me and Lumi. It has this huge window in the living room that she loves. She spends hours watching birds and judging me for not catching them for her. Life's been good though. I've even started dating again. Nothing too serious yet, but it's nice to be with someone who doesn't come with betrayal and a hidden agenda. Katie, still the best sister ever, comes over all the time with her kids, and my niece is obsessed with Lumi, always bringing her new toys and treats. Lumi pretends she's too good for them, but then plays with everything the second they leave. Classic cat move. Dad's doing great. Actually smiles more now that all the drama's over. He's talking about retiring soon, letting me take over completely. Says the company needs young blood who actually understands ethics. Pretty sure he was making a dig at Jake there. Mom would have liked how things turned out, I think. She always said honesty was more important than success. Guess she was right about that. Like she was about most things. I still think about everything sometimes. About how Jake and Sarah thought they were so smart, so above everyone else. About how they treated me like I was nothing because I was happy with a normal life. About all the times they made me feel small. But sitting here in my office, watching Lumi chase a sunbeam across my desk while I run the company Jake always bragged about carrying, I realized something. I won. Not by cheating or stealing or hurting people, just by being myself and doing things right. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and having a cat who thinks you're the greatest person in the world, even if all you do is bring her treats and clean her litter box. Edit. Thanks for all the awards and support. Lumi says thanks too. Actually, she didn't. She's asleep on my keyboard making typing this really hard. Edit 2. No, I won't share Sarah's social media or Jake's jail info. They're not worth the drama. Edit 3. And because everyone keeps asking, yes, Lumi is still the real boss of the company. She attended her first board meeting last week, slept through the whole thing but still made better decisions than Jake ever did. Story 2. This story is titled, Parents Raised My Rent to Support Golden Child Brother Lifestyle. So I just left and they're freaking out because they cannot afford to live without my rent money. What's up, Reddit? Need to get this crap off my chest before I lose my mind. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one. So I'm Jake, 25 male, and I've been living with my parents since forever. Not because I'm some loser who can't get his life together. I've got a decent job as a web developer, I pay all my own bills, and I've been saving up to start my own gaming studio someday. Actually been paying my parents $450 a month in rent since I turned 18. Yeah, 18. While most of my friends were living the college life, I was already forking over cash to live in the bedroom I grew up in. But whatever, that seemed fair. Housing market is complete garbage around here, and I figured helping the fam was better than throwing money at some random landlord. Plus, my job is like 15 minutes away, so it made sense. The problem isn't the money, it's my older brother Drew, 28. This dude is the walking definition of golden child syndrome. I swear my parents think he is a gift from God. Always have. Growing up, the double standard was so obvious it was actually laughable. Like if Drew broke my mom's favorite vase playing ball in the house? Accidents happen, sweetie. If I left a freaking water ring on the coffee table? 3-hour lecture about respecting property and responsibility. I wish I was exaggerating. Drew dropped out of college twice, jumped between like 8 different jobs, got fired from most of them, started a bunch of businesses that were basically just him scamming people on Facebook. And through all of it, my parents were like, Drew's just finding his path. He's so entrepreneurial. He's got such big dreams. Meanwhile, I'm over here with my steady job, paying rent, helping around the house, and it's like I'm fucking invisible most days. So about a month ago, Drew called my parents crying that he and his wife are between homes. That's code for we're broke AF and got nowhere to go. So he shows up at the door with his wife Amy, their 2 kids, Zoe, 7, and Tyler, 4, and this yappy little Pomeranian puppy they named Zeus. Turns out his latest business venture, some crypto BS because of course it was, crashed and burned, and they got evicted from their apartment. My parents didn't even hesitate. Of course you can stay here. Stay as long as you need. No discussion with me. No asking if I was cool with it. Just welcome the circus right in. The house went from reasonably quiet to total chaos overnight. The kids are running around screaming from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. That demon dog pisses on everything. My shoes, my backpack, even my bed once. And nobody trains it or disciplines it because he's just a puppy. My workspace? Gone. I WFH 3 days a week, and I had a decent setup in the spare room. Now it's filled with all their crap that didn't fit in the guest room. So I'm crammed in my bedroom trying to code while the kids are pounding on my door every 5 minutes, asking if they can use my computer to play Roblox. Bathroom? Always occupied. Kitchen? Disaster zone 24/7. Living room? Covered in toys and dog hair. My stuff keeps mysteriously breaking or disappearing. And when I bring it up, it's always, the kids are just playing, or accidents happen. The weirdest part? Drew has become super weird and protective whenever I talk to Amy. Like yesterday, I literally just asked if she was done with the toaster, and Drew came charging in from the other room like, my wife's got it handled, bro. What the freak? As if I'm hitting on her by asking about kitchen appliances? Get over yourself, dude. And through all this, guess who's still paying $450 rent? This guy. And guess how much Drew and his family are contributing? If you guessed 0, congrats. You win nothing because it's fucking obvious. I kept my mouth shut at first. They have kids. They're going through a rough time. Blah, blah, blah. My mom always says we have to stand by each other when we're in need, so I tried to be cool about it. But it gets better. Last week, my mom cornered me in my room with that look she gets when she's about to ask for something but act like it's no big deal. Jake, honey, she starts, doing that thing where she fidgets with her wedding ring. With Drew and his family staying with us, our expenses have really gone up. Groceries, utilities, everything. I already knew where this was going, but let her finish. We were thinking maybe you could contribute a bit more to help out, just until Drew gets back on his feet. I straight up asked, you want me to pay more rent when Drew and his entire family are living here for free? She got this weird pinched look on her face. It's not free, Jake. They're family. And family helps family. There it is again. The magical phrase that only seems to apply to me. So how much more are we talking? I asked. Just another $300 a month should cover it. $750 a month to live in my childhood bedroom, in a house overrun with screaming kids and a dog that pisses everywhere, where I have 0 privacy and my stuff keeps getting broken. I told her I'd think about it, just to get her off my back. But inside, I was fucking seething. That night at dinner, my dad backed her up with comments about everyone doing their part and tough times, while Drew sat there shoveling food in his face, occasionally saying stuff like, thanks for understanding, bro. Then, the cherry on top of this shit Sunday, Mom casually mentions that Drew and Amy are going out Friday night for date night, and I'll be watching the kids. Not asked. Told. I have plans, I said, even though I didn't. What plans? Mom demanded, like I needed her permission to have a social life. Just plans. Drew jumped in. Come on, man. We haven't had a night out in forever. The kids love their Uncle Jake. Everyone stared at me expectantly until I caved. Fine, whatever. Friday night rolls around, and instead of playing the new game I'd been waiting to try, I'm chasing two hyper kids and a demon dog around the house. Drew and Amy said they'd be home by 10. They rolled in at midnight, both clearly buzzed, not even apologizing for being late. Oh, and while I was distracted by the kids, Zeus left a steaming surprise in my room. Stepped right in it when I went to bed. Perfect end to a perfect night. At this point, I'm starting to feel like I'm going insane. Am I crazy for thinking this whole situation is completely messed up? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is whether I'm in the wrong here. Should I suck it up and pay more to keep the peace? Or am I right to feel like this is completely unfair? I've always been the type of person who avoids conflict, but this situation is pushing me to my limit. I'm tired of being the one who always has to compromise while Drew gets a free pass. If anyone's been in a similar situation, I'd love to hear how you handled it. I'll keep you all updated on what happens next. Thanks for reading. Update 1. Hey guys, thanks for all the comments on my last post. Didn't expect so many people to relate to my family BS. Anyway, things have gotten even worse since then, if you can believe it. So after that whole babysitting fiasco, I was still on the fence about what to do. Like, yeah, the situation was complete garbage, but moving out seemed like such a huge step. Apartments around here are stupid expensive, and I've been trying to save up for my gaming studio dream. Plus, moving out felt like I was somehow letting my parents win. IDK if that makes sense, but it felt like I was admitting defeat or something. But then a bunch of stuff happened that pushed me over the edge. The morning after I'd babysat, I woke up to find Amy going through my desk drawers. Not even subtly, just straight up digging through my stuff. I was so shocked I just stood there for a second before asking, "What are you doing?" She jumped like I'd caught her stealing, which technically I had. "Oh, I was just looking for some tape. The kids want to make a craft. There's tape in the kitchen drawer, where it's been for like 20 years. Well, I couldn't find it there," she said, all defensive. Before I could say anything else, Drew appeared in my doorway like he has some kind of radar for when someone might call out his wife's BS. "Everything cool in here?" He had this weird aggressive tone, like I was threatening her or something. "Your wife is going through my stuff," I said. Drew's face got all hard. "She said she was looking for tape, man. Don't make it a federal case. It's my personal space, Drew. Would you like it if I started going through your things?" "That's different," he said, putting his arm around Amy protectively. "We're guests here." "Exactly. You're guests. In the house I pay to live in." Drew laughed. "Always about money with you, isn't it? Some of us have real problems, dude." I almost lost it right there. I have a policy against punching people who are dumber than me, but Drew was seriously testing it. I just turned around and walked out before I said something that would make family dinners even more awkward. Later that night, I was heading to the kitchen for a snack when I overheard Drew talking to my parents. They didn't see me in the hallway, so I stopped to listen. "Yeah, I know. Eavesdropping isn't cool, but whatever. Jake has always been so self-centered," Drew was saying. "Would it kill him to step up and help out the family for once?" Self-centered? Me? I'm the one who's been paying rent for 7 years while this mooch has never contributed a dollar. I was about to storm in and say exactly that, but then my mom chimed in, "I know, honey. He just doesn't understand what it's like for you with the kids and everything. But he agreed to pay the extra rent, so that will help." "Wait, what?" "I never agreed to that. I said I'd think about it." "He's got all that money saved up," Drew continued, "always talking about his stupid video game company. Meanwhile, we can barely afford clothes for the kids. Maybe if you hadn't blown all your money on crypto, dumbass." And honestly, Drew lowered his voice, he makes Amy uncomfortable, always hanging around when she's in the kitchen or living room. She doesn't like being alone with him. I nearly choked. Me making her uncomfortable? She's the one going through my stuff, and I actively avoid them as much as humanly possible. I went back to my room without getting food. My appetite was gone. I lay in bed fuming for hours, replaying everything in my head. The next morning at breakfast, my mom casually mentioned that since I'd agreed to the new rent amount, she'd be expecting the first payment on Friday. I opened my mouth to argue that I never agreed to anything, but my dad jumped in with, "We really appreciate you helping out, son. Family first, right?" They were tag teaming me, and I knew from experience there was no winning this argument. So I just nodded and focused on my cereal. Then my mom dropped another bomb. "Oh, and Drew and Amy need someone to watch the kids this weekend. They've got a wedding to go to." "The whole weekend?" I asked. "Just Saturday afternoon through Sunday evening," she said, like that was no big deal. "I can't," I said. "I've got work stuff to finish." "You can do your computer stuff anytime," my mom said dismissively. The wedding's only on this specific date. Yeah, bro, Drew added. Don't be so selfish. It's not like you have actual plans. How the hell would he know what plans I have? And more importantly, why is their social life my responsibility? Actually, I do have plans, I lied. I promised to help my buddy Chris move. Can't you reschedule? My mom pressed. No, he's already got the truck rented. The look my mom gave me could have melted steel. Drew just shook his head like I'd disappointed him personally. Amy muttered something that sounded like typical under her breath. The weekend babysitting thing was bad enough, but what really pushed me over the edge happened a few days later. I came home from work to find Zeus had chewed through my expensive gaming headset, like completely destroyed it. Those things cost $200. When I confronted Drew about it, he just shrugged. It's just a headset, man. He's a puppy. What do you expect? I expect you to keep your dog under control and replace things he destroys, I said. We don't have money for fancy headsets, Drew said. If it matters that much to you, buy another one. Or better yet, grow up and stop playing video games all day, says the 28-year-old who lost all his money on a crypto scam. But the final straw? I overheard Drew and my mom talking about my savings account. They were actually discussing how I should pitch in some of my savings to help the family through this rough patch. That was it. The absolute limit. They were plotting to guilt me into handing over my savings. Money I've been putting aside for years, working overtime, skipping vacations, living frugally. Also, Drew could continue his consequence-free lifestyle. I went back to my room, opened my laptop, and started looking at apartment listings. I'm absolutely done. I didn't know how I was going to afford it or where I'd go, but one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't stay in that house another month, not with these people who saw me as nothing but an ATM with legs. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing like crazy. Should I confront them? Try one more time to reason with them? Cave and pay the extra money to keep the peace? Every option seemed like a losing one. Around 3 a.m., I texted my buddy Chris. Yeah, the one I made up as an excuse earlier. We used to be tight in high school, but kinda drifted apart after graduation. We still grab beers occasionally, but that's about it. Hey man, weird question. You know anyone looking for a roommate? Gotta get out of my parents' place ASAP. Wasn't expecting a reply till morning. But dude texted right back, dude, this is crazy timing. My roommate just told me he's moving in with his girlfriend next month. You serious? Dead serious. Parents' house has turned into a nightmare. Chris, let's talk tomorrow. Might be perfect timing. I finally fell asleep after that, feeling like maybe the universe was throwing me a bone for once. Met up with Chris the next day after work. His apartment isn't anything fancy. Basic 2-bedroom in a decent part of town, about 20 minutes from my job. But it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, free of my family. Chris said his roommate was leaving in 3 weeks, and if I wanted in, rent would be $575 plus utilities split 50-50. More than I was paying at home before the increase, but less than the $750 my parents wanted now. And without the constant BS, I didn't even hesitate. Told him I'd take it. We did a quick handshake deal and agreed to sort out the details over the weekend. Now I had 3 weeks to figure out how to move out without causing World War III at home. I knew if I told my parents I was leaving, they'd pull out every manipulation tactic in the book. Guilt, anger, fake concern, the works. Plus, they'd probably try to squeeze as much money out of me as possible before I left. So I decided to go stealth mode. Operation GTFO was officially a go. First step was tying up loose ends. I called my bank and changed all my passwords and security questions. Removed any paper statements coming to the house. If they were actually considering taking my savings, I wasn't taking any chances. Next was the physical escape plan. I couldn't just pack everything up without them noticing, so I had to be smart about it. I started with the stuff no one would miss. Books from my bookshelf, winter clothes from the back of my closet, extra computer equipment. Each day I'd take a small load out to my car before work, then drop it off at Chris's place during lunch or after work. His roommate was cool with me storing boxes in the living room until he moved out. Thank God for decent humans, right? The hardest part was keeping a straight face around my family, acting normal when all I wanted to do was tell them exactly what I thought about their BS. Drew was still being his usual entitled self, stomping around the house like he owned it, letting his kids and that demon dog destroy everything. Speaking of the dog, Zeus nearly blew my cover. He kept following me around barking whenever I moved stuff from my room. I started carrying dog treats in my pocket to shut him the fuck up. Felt like I was in a heist movie or something. One close call happened when Zoe, Drew's 7-year-old, saw me loading a box into my car. "What's in the box, Uncle Jake?" she asked. popping up behind me like some horror movie kid. Nearly had a heart attack. Just some old stuff I'm donating, I lied. Can I see? It's boring grown-up stuff. Just old papers and books. Can I help carry things? Not today, kiddo. I've got to get to work. She looked disappointed, but thankfully ran off to play. Kids that age have the attention span of goldfish sometimes, which worked in my favor. Meanwhile, my parents were still on my case about the extra rent. Mom kept casually mentioning bills and expenses whenever I was around. Dad started giving me the silent treatment when I didn't immediately hand over the extra $300. The absolute best, though, was Drew. This idiot had the nerve to lecture me about financial responsibility one night. You know, Jake, he said, sprawled on the couch while I tried to watch TV, when you have a family of your own someday, you'll understand that sometimes you have to make sacrifices. The irony was mind-blowing. Fascinating insight from a guy who's living rent-free in his parents' house at 28, I replied. That's a low blow, man. I'm going through a tough time. The crypto market is volatile. The crypto market is a scam, and you fell for it. Twice. He got all huffy and left the room. Small victories. Then came another fun family meeting. Mom called everyone to the living room one evening. Me, Dad, Drew, and Amy. The kids were already in bed, thankfully. We need to discuss the sleeping arrangements, Mom announced. With the kids getting bigger, they need more space. I immediately got a bad feeling. We're thinking they should have their own room, she continued. Jake, since you're working so much anyway, we thought you wouldn't mind if the kids used your room. You could take the den downstairs. The den is basically a converted basement storage room with no windows and a futon that's older than I am. Plus, it's right next to the laundry room, so you hear the washing machine at all hours. Absolutely not, I said before I could stop myself. Everyone looked shocked, like they couldn't believe I'd refused such a reasonable request to give up my bedroom for the freeloaders. It would just be temporary, Mom said, until Drew and Amy get back on their feet. Which will be when exactly? I asked. They've been here a month with zero progress toward moving out. I'm applying for jobs, Drew protested. Are you? Because all I see is you playing Xbox and complaining about how hard your life is. Boys, stop it, Mom interjected. Jake, it would really help the family if… No, I cut her off. I pay rent for my room. I'm not moving to the basement so Drew's kids can have my space. That's final. The room went silent. Dad looked uncomfortable. Mom looked like she was about to cry, her go-to manipulation tactic, and Drew just glared at me like I'd kicked his dog, which I'm about to. Amy finally broke the silence. Well, I think it's incredibly selfish. Those poor children crammed into one tiny room while you have all that space to yourself. I almost laughed. You know what's selfish, Amy? Moving your entire family into someone else's house and then acting entitled to even more space? She gasped like I'd slapped her. Drew stood up, getting in my face. Don't talk to my wife like that. Or what? I shot back, standing up too. I'm a good 3 inches taller than Drew and hit the gym regularly, unlike him. He backed down pretty quick. This is exactly why the kids don't like being around you, he muttered, retreating to Amy's side. That was news to me, considering the kids wouldn't leave me alone most days. I looked around at all their angry, disappointed faces and realized something important. These people weren't going to change. They would keep taking and taking until there was nothing left of me. I'm going to bed, I announced. And just to be crystal clear, I'm not moving to the basement, I'm not giving up my room, and this discussion is over. As I walked out, I heard Amy whisper to Drew, See? I told you he's always been the problem. That night, I finalized my plans. I texted Chris asking if I could move in early, sleeping on his couch until his roommate left. He agreed. Operation GTFO was entering its final phase. No more Mr. Nice Guy. It was time to put myself first for once. So now, everything is set. I've signed the lease, packed my stuff, and I'm just waiting for Chris to tell me when I can come. I know this is going to cause a lot of drama, but honestly, I don't give a shit anymore. I need to do what's best for me, and staying in that house isn't it. I'm ready to start fresh in a place where I can actually focus on my goals without all the chaos and stress holding me back. Wish me luck, guys. I'll let you know how it all goes in the next update. Update 2. What's up, Reddit? Thanks for all the support on my last few posts. Reading your comments has honestly kept me sane through this whole clusterfuck. So here's what's gone down since my last update. After that blowout about the bedroom situation, things at home got real tense. My parents were giving me the silent treatment, which was actually kind of peaceful TBH. Drew was stomping around like a toddler who got his toys taken away. And Amy kept making these passive-aggressive comments whenever I was in earshot. Some people just don't understand what it means to be a family, she'd say to no one in particular while I was grabbing coffee in the morning. I just ignored it all and focused on finalizing my escape. Chris texted saying I could move in that weekend. His roommate was cool with me using the living room to sleep until he officially moved out in a couple weeks. Said the guy felt bad for me after Chris told him about my situation. Strangers showing more empathy than my own family? Pretty sad when you think about it. Friday night, I made sure to act normal at dinner. Even offered to do the dishes afterward, which surprised everyone. My mom looked at me suspiciously, like she was trying to figure out what my angle was. But I just smiled and said I was in a good mood because of a work thing. They bought it. After everyone went to bed, I packed up the last of my essential stuff. Laptop, remaining clothes, toiletries, chargers, all that important shit you need for daily life. I'd already moved most of my other stuff bit by bit over the past couple weeks. Set my alarm for 5 a.m. Figured that would give me plenty of time to load up my car and bounce before anyone woke up. Drew and his family never get up before 9 on weekends, and my parents are usually up around 7:30. Of course, Zeus the demon dog almost ruined everything. My alarm went off, I quietly got up and started carrying bags to my car, and that little fur missile started going ballistic, barking and jumping around like I was an intruder. I panicked for a second, thinking he'd wake everyone up. Tossed him one of the treats I'd been using to bribe him. Yes, I came prepared even for this, but he just ate it and kept barking. Little bastard. Finally had to pick him up and lock him in the bathroom with another treat. Felt bad for whoever would find him there later, but desperate times and all that. Loaded everything into my car in record time. My hands were shaking the whole time, partly from the early morning cold, partly from the adrenaline rush of finally escaping. I stood in my bedroom one last time, looking around at the empty shelves and bare walls. It was weird. I'd lived in that room most of my life, had some good memories there, before everything went to shit. For a split second, I felt this pang of doubt. Was I making a mistake? Would I regret leaving like this? Then I heard Zeus start barking again from the bathroom, and Drew yell, "Someone shut that fucking dog up!" from his room. Nope, no regrets. I'd thought about leaving a note, but what was there to say that hadn't already been said? So I just grabbed my keys, took one last look around, and walked out. Driving away from my parents' house as the sun was just coming up felt surreal, like I was in some coming-of-age movie or something. I half expected dramatic music to start playing. Instead, I just cranked up some Metallica and hit the gas. Made it to Chris's place around 6 a.m. He was still asleep, obviously, so I sat in my car for a bit, scrolling through my phone. I'd turned it to silent mode, figuring it wouldn't be long before my family realized I was gone, and the texts, calls started flooding in. Chris finally woke up around 7:30 and helped me bring my stuff in. His place isn't anything special. Basic apartment with a small kitchen, decent-sized living room, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. But it was quiet. No screaming kids, no barking dog. Just blessed, beautiful silence. "Make yourself at home," Chris said, gesturing to the couch. "Jim's room will be empty in a couple weeks." I crashed on the couch and slept for like 4 hours straight. Best sleep I'd had in months, even on a lumpy couch. When I woke up and checked my phone, it was exactly what I expected. 8 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from Drew, surprising he even bothered, and about a million texts. Mom, "Jake, where are you?" Mom, "Are you okay? Call me right now." Mom, "Why is your room empty?" Mom, "I can't believe you would do this to us." Dad, "Son, your mother is very upset. Call home." Зрение? Это не так, как взрослые решают проблемы. Come home so we can talk about this. Drew, "Wow. Real mature, bro. Just bail on everyone." Zrenia, "Mama плачет. Hope you're happy with yourself." The Guilt Trip Express was right on schedule. I turned my phone off and helped Chris set up his new gaming system. Figured I'd deal with the family drama later. Around 6 p.m., I finally turned my phone back on and called my mom. Figured I owed her at least that much, even if she had been unfair to me. She answered on the first ring. "Jake, where are you?" "I moved out," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm staying with a friend." "You moved out? Without telling anyone? How could you do this to us?" I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She was screaming so loud. "I tried talking to you guys multiple times about how unfair the situation was. You didn't listen. So you just leave? No note? No warning? Do you have any idea how worried we've been? Your father and I have been calling hospitals." The guilt trip was in full effect, right on cue. "Mom, I'm an adult. I don't need permission to move out. And I'm fine, obviously. This is about the rent increase, isn't it? Or the bedroom. We could have worked something out if you'd just talked to us instead of running away like a child." I almost laughed. "I did talk to you. Multiple times. You ignored everything I said and kept pushing for more. More money, more space, more sacrifices. All while Drew contributed nothing. Your brother has children, Jake. He's going through a difficult time, and I'm sorry about that. But it's not my responsibility to support his family. I've been paying rent for 7 years while he's never paid a dime. It's not fair, and you know it. Life isn't fair, she shot back. Family helps family. Exactly. But it has to go both ways, Mom. I can't be the only one giving while everyone else takes. She started crying then, which almost broke my resolve. My mom crying has always been my kryptonite, but I held firm. I told her I wasn't coming back, that I'd signed a lease with Chris and would grab my stuff next weekend. She hit me with the classic, "We're disappointed" line. I shot back that I was disappointed too, for always putting Drew first. Then I hung up. It had to be said. Drew texted me later that night. "Thanks for bailing and leaving us to deal with Mom's breakdown. Real stand-up bro you are." I replied, "Thanks for moving your entire family in and expecting me to foot the bill. Real stand-up bro you are." Dad also doesn't stop trying to contact me, sending threats and guilt trips, saying he cannot afford the rent alone. Who said I signed up to be a second parent? Despite all the drama, I feel like I made the right decision. My new place is quiet, my roommate is cool, and I'm finally able to focus on my studies and work without constant distractions. It hasn't been easy cutting ties with my family, but I know it was necessary. I can't keep sacrificing my own happiness and future for people who don't appreciate me. So, yeah, that's where I'm at now. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Thanks to everyone who's been following my story. I'll probably post one final update soon to let you all know how things turn out. Final update. Hey again! It's been a while since my last update. Thanks to everyone who's followed my saga and offered advice and support. Figured I owed you guys a final update on how things have played out. It's been a couple of weeks since I moved out of my parents' house, and honestly, life's been pretty good. Living with Chris has worked out better than I expected. We split everything, respect each other's space, and generally just get along without drama. After years of family chaos, it's been like a vacation for my mental health. My room is set up exactly how I want it. I can leave my laptop on my desk without worrying about sticky fingers destroying it. I can sleep in on weekends without being woken up by screaming kids or a barking dog. I can cook without someone criticizing my food choices or eating all my leftovers. The small things, you know? Work has been going great too. Without the constant stress at home, I've been more focused and productive. I've also been working on my game development stuff on the side. Nothing major yet, but it feels good to be pursuing my passion instead of just talking about it. As for my family, well, it's been complicated. 2 weeks after I moved out, I went back to get the rest of my stuff. It was awkward as hell. Mom looked like death warmed over, wearing the same robe I remember from when I was a kid. Dad was quiet, moving around the house like a ghost. The place had this heavy feeling, like all the energy had been sucked out of it. Chris came with me to keep things quick, but Mom tried to corner me in my old room anyway. "You could have talked to us," she kept saying, voice all shaky. "You didn't have to just leave." I kept it brief. "I did try to talk to you. Multiple times. You guys chose not to listen." She started crying, which made me feel like shit despite everything. Dad just stood in the doorway, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Neither of them directly asked me to come back, but the question hung in the air. There were a bit of silence on their behalf. I thought I could finally breathe, but then Dad called one evening, sounding unusually humble. "Son, I know we've had our differences, but we need to talk. Man to man." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee at a place near my work. Neutral territory, public setting, seemed safe enough. The minute he sat down, I knew it was a setup. He looked haggard. He went on about how Mom was beside herself and how the whole family is falling apart since I left. I almost felt bad until he dropped the real reason for the meeting. "Jake, we're in a tight spot financially. With you gone, we're short on the mortgage payment this month." I just stared at him. "So, you want me to keep paying rent for a place I don't live in anymore?" "Not rent," he said quickly. "Just helping out family during a rough patch. Once Drew gets on his feet," I cut him off. "Dad, I moved out because you guys were taking advantage of me financially while letting Drew freeload. And now you're asking me to keep paying even though I don't live there?" "It's not about paying," he insisted. "It's about responsibility. Family obligations." "What about Drew's obligations?" I asked. "Why isn't he stepping up?" Dad got defensive. "Drew has a family. He's going through a tough time." "He's been going through a tough time for years, Dad. I'm done subsidizing his lifestyle." That's when Dad dropped the bomb. "We need $800 this month or we might lose the house." $800. More than I was paying when I lived there. I laughed in his face, which wasn't my proudest moment. But come on. "No, Dad. Not happening. Drew needs to get a job. You and Mom need to stop enabling him. He left looking defeated, and I felt a mixture of guilt and anger. Part of me worried they really were struggling, but another part knew this was just more manipulation. The next day, Drew finally broke his silence with a series of nasty, almost threatening texts. Way to ditch the family when we need you most. You're dead to us. Mom's having anxiety attacks because of you. If she ends up in the hospital, that's on you. Dad's about to lose his job from all the stress. If that happens, don't be surprised when I show up to talk. My kids keep asking where Uncle Jake went. Hope you're proud of making them cry. Maybe I'll remind them exactly who to blame. I blocked his number. Then Amy tried. Her approach was more subtle. She sent this long message about how much the kids missed me, how Zoe cried herself to sleep asking for me, how they might have to move to a dangerous neighborhood if they got evicted, laying it on thick. Maybe you could just help out temporarily, she suggested. For the kids? I wasn't falling for it. I sent back, strange how no one cared about my financial well-being when I was being charged $450 in rent while Drew lived free. Sorry, but this isn't my problem anymore. She responded with a paragraph about how selfish I was being. I blocked her too. Every time I shut their attempts, they try a different angle. Like they couldn't leave me the fuck alone. A few days later, when my aunt, Mom's sister, called. I rarely talked to her, so I knew something was up. Jake, what's this I hear about you refusing to help your parents with their mortgage? They might lose their home. Turns out my parents had been telling the entire extended family that I'd abandoned them financially, and they were on the brink of homelessness because of me. They conveniently left out the part where they'd been charging me rent for years, while Drew contributed nothing. But the final straw was when I found out through a mutual friend that my parents weren't even struggling financially. Turns out, Dad had gotten a bonus the month before I left, and the whole "we might lose the house" sob story was just BS to guilt me into handing over cash. That's when I went full no contact, blocked their numbers, emails, socials, everything. Even told my job not to put any calls through from them. 2 weeks of silence was bliss until the flying monkeys arrived. Family friends, distant relatives, even my mom's church buddies, all telling me to make peace. I ignored most, but responded to my cousin Mark, who told me the whole story. He was surprisingly supportive. He also gave me the inside scoop. The house is a mess. Drew and Amy aren't paying a dime. The cherry on top? My parents finally gave Drew an ultimatum. Get a job in 30 days or move out. The guy's panicking because his so-called crypto expertise isn't exactly hireable. Mark also dropped a bomb. Mom admitted they never needed my money for the mortgage. They were secretly helping Drew pay off gambling debts. Gambling with 2 kids. Unbelievable. So yeah, I'm done. No contact with my parents, Drew, or Amy. I still send birthday cards to the kids. They're innocent in all this. But otherwise, that bridge is dust. And honestly, I've never been happier. I'm currently working on my game development. Even started dating someone from a programming meetup. If you're stuck in a similar mess, here's what I've learned. Cutting people off isn't just an option. It's survival. Especially when it's family, because they know exactly how to mess with you. Boundaries don't work when people don't respect them. Sometimes you need a whole damn wall. Thanks, Reddit, for giving me the push to finally put myself first. Edit. For those asking for game development updates, working on a small indie puzzle game in my spare time. Nothing revolutionary, but it's fun, and I'm learning a ton. Dreams don't have expiration dates. Story 3. I found out my parents called me a freeloader after I paid for their life, so I cut them off. Hey, I'm Alex, and let me tell you, growing up with a golden child sibling is like living in someone else's spotlight all the time. You know the type. There's always that one kid in the family who can do no wrong. For me, that kid was my older brother, Eric. The guy was practically a superhero in my parents' eyes. Star athlete, straight-A student, Mr. Popular. You name it, he had it going on. It was always about him. From the time I was little, it was clear who the favorite was. Our house was the place for family get-togethers, and trust me, these weren't small, intimate dinners. Nah, we're talking about big events. Like half the neighborhood showing up, uncles, aunts, cousins, people I barely knew. And somehow these gatherings always turned into Eric appreciation parties. Dad would be flipping burgers on the grill, Mom would be running around making sure everyone had enough food, and there'd be Eric, holding court like a king, with people just hanging on his every word. It's not like I didn't try to fit in, you know? I wanted to be part of it, but somehow it just never worked out. I'd crack a joke and it'd fall flat, or I'd mention something about school, and it was like no one even heard me. I remember one time, this is just a random memory, but it sticks with me. I was about 10, and I got a perfect score on this science test. I was super proud of it. So during one of these family barbecues, I went up to my dad, all excited to show him. But just as I was about to say something, my mom comes running out with this huge cake, and everyone's celebrating Eric winning some soccer tournament. So yeah, my little science test, totally forgotten. That was basically my life in a nutshell. I wasn't a bad kid or anything. In fact, I did pretty well in school. I wasn't out partying or causing trouble, but you wouldn't know it from how little attention I got. Meanwhile, Eric was the family's pride and joy. He had his own shelf for all his trophies and medals, and Mom even made a scrapbook for him, with every single achievement carefully glued in. I didn't have a scrapbook. I didn't even have a shelf. Hell, I'm pretty sure half my stuff was crammed into a box in the attic somewhere, collecting dust. The thing that really got me, though, wasn't even the lack of attention. It was the way people acted like Eric was some kind of god. Like, no joke. At every single family event, someone would bring him up, even if he wasn't there. It's like, oh, did you hear about Eric? He's playing varsity now. Or Eric's got such a bright future ahead of him, I just know he's going to be successful. And I'd be sitting there like, hi? I exist too. The worst part? I started believing it. Like, maybe there really was something wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't worth the attention. I'd sit in my room sometimes just thinking about why I wasn't good enough, even though I was doing everything right. I wasn't failing school. I wasn't getting into trouble. So why wasn't I seen? There was only one person who seemed to get me. Great Aunt Sharon. She wasn't actually all that great in the big important family sense, but to me, she was awesome. Every time there was a family gathering, she'd always take a moment to sit with me. While everyone else was fawning over Eric or caught up in the latest family gossip, she'd pull up a chair and ask me about what I was reading or how school was going. And unlike everyone else, she actually cared about the answer. I remember one time I was hiding in the backyard during one of the big parties. I wasn't feeling it that day and just wanted to escape the noise, so I found a quiet spot behind the garage with a book. Aunt Sharon found me there, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, and instead of dragging me back into the crowd, she sat down beside me. "What are you reading, kiddo?" she asked, her voice calm, like she didn't have anywhere else she'd rather be. I showed her the cover, some fantasy book I'd borrowed from the library. "It's about this kid who finds out he's got these magic powers," I mumbled, half expecting her to lose interest. But she didn't. "Sounds exciting," she said, giving me that warm smile she always had. "You've got a good imagination, Alex. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." That stuck with me. It was the first time in a long while I felt like someone noticed me for who I was, not just Eric's little brother. Aunt Sharon didn't care about soccer trophies or school grades. She just cared about me being me. And honestly, in a family like mine, that meant the world. Still, as much as I loved those quiet moments with Aunt Sharon, they didn't really make up for everything else. Every day felt like a reminder that I wasn't Eric. Like when I started high school, I figured it'd be a fresh start, you know? New teachers, new opportunities. But nope, everyone knew me as Eric's brother. It didn't matter what I did or how well I did it. Every teacher, every coach, every classmate would say the same thing. "Oh, you're Eric's brother. He was such a great student, a great athlete." Even when I made top grades, nobody seemed to care. One time I got an A+ on this massive project in history class. I was pumped. I went home and tried to tell my mom, but she was too busy on the phone with some other soccer mom talking about Eric's latest game. I stood there for a while, waiting for her to hang up, but after like 10 minutes, I just gave up and went to my room. That project got stuffed into my drawer, forgotten like everything else I'd done. The funny thing is, I didn't even want to be Eric. I didn't care about sports or being the most popular guy in school. I just wanted some recognition, you know? Just a little bit of that same pride my parents had for him. But it never came. And the thing is, after a while, you stop expecting it. You start to convince yourself that it's normal, that being overlooked is just how things are supposed to be. That's how I lived my whole childhood, constantly overshadowed, constantly trying to prove I was worth something. It wasn't until years later that I finally realized I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But back then, I was just a kid, waiting for someone to notice I was there. So high school started, and I had this tiny bit of hope that things would be different. You know, new environment, new people, maybe a chance to finally be seen as my own person instead of just Eric's younger brother. But of course, reality hit pretty quick. It wasn't even the first day when people started connecting the dots. "Oh, you're Eric's brother, right? He was like amazing on the soccer team. Yeah, your brother was such a good student. You must be just like him." That last comment really got to me because I wasn't like him, not at all. But people just couldn't help making those comparisons. It was like I was walking around in this shadow that was glued to me no matter where I went. Every single teacher, every single coach, they all had this weird expectation that I'd be just like Eric, like I was supposed to carry on his legacy or something. But that wasn't who I was. I wasn't some sports star, and I definitely wasn't the life of the party. I was the kid who sat in the back of the classroom, taking notes and actually paying attention. I worked hard, studied late, and asked questions after class when I didn't get something. It was important to me that I understood things, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I actually cared. And I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I was doing well, better than anyone expected. There was one time, I remember it clearly during my junior year. I was in biology, and we had this massive project that everyone was stressing out over. The teacher, Mrs. Baker, told us it was going to count for like 40% of our grade for the semester. People were freaking out, and I get it. Biology wasn't exactly everyone's favorite subject, but I actually liked it. I dove into that project like my life depended on it, researching everything I could about cell division and how it affects the body. I spent days in the library, poring over books and articles, and I'm pretty sure I was the only one who actually read the assigned chapters. By the time the project was due, I felt pretty confident. Mrs. Baker called me up after class one day, holding my project in her hand, and I'll never forget what she said. She smiled at me, actually smiled, and said, "Alex, this is excellent work. You really went above and beyond." That little moment meant the world to me. It was probably the first time a teacher had acknowledged me like I wasn't just some kid in the background. I felt proud walking home that day. But of course, when I told my parents about it, they barely reacted. I remember coming home and sitting at the kitchen table with my mom. She was on the phone, as usual, chatting with one of her friends about Eric's latest game. I waited for her to hang up, holding my project in my hands like it was a trophy. When she finally put the phone down, I showed her the grade and told her what Mrs. Baker had said. "Oh, that's nice, honey," she said without even looking at it. Then she went right back to talking about how Eric was getting scouted by some college coach. I just sat there, staring at the A+ on my project, feeling like I'd been hit with this invisible wall. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed to matter to them. It was always Eric this, Eric that. That kind of stuff happened all the time. Like, there was this other time in history class where we had to write a paper on World War II. I spent hours researching and writing, making sure everything was perfect. I was so proud of how it turned out. The teacher, Mr. Davis, even read part of my paper out loud in class because he thought it was one of the best ones. But when I got home and tried to tell my dad, he just shrugged and said something like, "That's cool, but have you seen Eric's new soccer trophy?" It wasn't just my parents, though. It felt like the whole world was fixated on Eric. Whenever we had family dinners or gatherings, all anyone wanted to talk about was how great he was doing. My grandparents would sit there for hours asking him questions about his games, his future plans, and his scholarships. And when the conversation finally died down, it would shift to something else, like the weather or politics. No one ever asked me about school or how I was doing. At some point, I just stopped trying. I mean, why bother? It was clear that nothing I did would ever compare to Eric's accomplishments in their eyes. I'd come home from school, head straight to my room, and bury myself in my homework or a book. It wasn't like I had much of a social life anyway. While Eric was out with his friends, going to parties or playing in games, I was at home, studying and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The funny thing is, even though I didn't get much attention at home, I was actually thriving at school. I joined a few clubs, made friends with people who shared the same interests as me, and even started getting recognized by my teachers as one of the top students in my grade. I wasn't some social butterfly, but I found my group, the kids who liked to stay after class and talk about books, science, and movies. It was nice to have people who didn't expect me to be anyone other than myself. But even with all that, there was still this lingering feeling that I wasn't good enough. Like, no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough to get the recognition I wanted from my parents. I mean, it's not like I was craving the spotlight or anything, but a little acknowledgement would have been nice. Just once, I wanted to hear them say they were proud of me for something I'd done, not because I was Eric's sibling, but because I was me. I guess the turning point came during senior year, when I was applying to colleges. I'd worked my butt off for years, getting good grades, participating in clubs, and trying to build a solid application. I applied to a few schools, and one day I got the letter, acceptance into a business program at State University. I was thrilled. I ran home, excited to tell my parents the good news, but when I walked in the door and announced that I'd been accepted, their reaction was underwhelming, to say the least. "Oh, that's nice, Alex," my mom said, barely looking up from her magazine. "Cool," my dad muttered, scrolling through his phone. "What about Eric? Did he get in anywhere?" That was it. That was the moment I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, they were never going to see me the way I wanted them to. I wasn't Eric, and that meant I didn't matter as much in their eyes. It hurt, but it also lit a fire in me. If they weren't going to believe in me, I was going to prove them wrong, one way or another. So, after that whole thing with getting into state university, I pretty much accepted that my parents weren't ever going to care about my accomplishments the way they did with Eric. I tried not to dwell on it too much, but it still stung. I mean, it's hard not to feel it when you're working your butt off and the people who are supposed to care the most barely even notice. Anyway, I'd been accepted into the business program, which was a big deal for me. I was pumped, but the reality of paying for it was creeping up fast. With no help from my parents, I was basically on my own. I'd been applying for scholarships, grants, and anything else that could help cover the costs, but it wasn't enough. That's when Aunt Sharon stepped in. I wasn't expecting it at all. One afternoon, I was hanging out at her place, helping her with some stuff around the house. Aunt Sharon lived in this cozy little house that always smelled like fresh bread or cookies, way better than the chaos at my parents' house. We were sitting in her kitchen, and out of nowhere, she asked me how things were going with college. I tried to shrug it off, like I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Yeah, I got accepted, but I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for it. It's kind of up in the air right now. Aunt Sharon put down the dish she was washing and turned to look at me. Alex, I know your parents haven't been much help, but you're smart, and you've worked hard to get where you are. You shouldn't have to give up on your dreams because of money. I didn't say anything at first. I mean, what could I say? She wasn't wrong, but I had already resigned myself to the fact that I might have to delay college or work full-time just to save up. It was just one of those things I thought I'd have to deal with. Then Aunt Sharon said something that completely floored me. I've got some savings, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I've been putting money away for years, and I'd like to give it to you for your tuition. I just stared at her for a minute, my brain trying to catch up with what she was saying. Wait, what? You want to help me pay for school? I couldn't believe it. No one had ever offered to help me like that before. She smiled and nodded. I don't have any kids of my own, and I've always seen you as my own. You've got so much potential, Alex. You deserve to go to college and make something of yourself. And I'm not going to let money be the thing that stops you. I swear I almost started crying right there in her kitchen. It was like all the weight I'd been carrying around, the pressure of figuring everything out on my own, just lifted. I didn't even know how to thank her. I just hugged her tight and tried not to lose it. Aunt Sharon's offer changed everything. Suddenly, college wasn't just a distant dream, it was happening. I spent the next few weeks getting everything in order, applying for student housing, signing up for classes, and preparing for this huge new chapter in my life. And the whole time, Aunt Sharon was there, supporting me in ways I didn't even know I needed. But of course, my parents had no idea about any of this. I hadn't told them about Aunt Sharon's offer because, honestly, I didn't think they'd care. They were too busy with Eric's latest achievements to even ask me about my plans. It wasn't until one evening, a couple of weeks before I was set to leave for college, that they finally brought it up. We were sitting around the dinner table, me, my parents, and Eric. The usual chatter about his soccer games and college applications was in full swing when my mom suddenly turned to me. So, Alex, what are you planning to do after graduation? She asked, like it was the first time she'd thought about it. I almost laughed. I'm going to college, I said, trying to keep my tone casual. I got accepted into the business program at State University. For a split second, the room went quiet. My dad put down his fork and raised an eyebrow. And how exactly are you planning on paying for that? This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. I took a deep breath. Aunt Sharon is helping me. She's giving me her savings for my tuition. My parents' reactions were exactly what I expected. My mom's eyes went wide with shock, and my dad's face twisted into this weird combination of surprise and anger. Sharon's giving you money? My dad said, his voice sharp. That's ridiculous. If she has money to spare, it should go to Eric. He needs a new car for college. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They didn't even care that I was finally getting my shot at something. They were more concerned about Eric needing a car. I felt this wave of frustration rise up in me, but I tried to stay calm. This isn't about Eric, I said, my voice tight. Aunt Sharon wants to help me. She offered, and I'm not turning it down. Mom, of course, tried to guilt-trip me. But your brother needs that money, Alex. You know how important his future is. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm important too, I snapped, louder than I intended. This is my future we're talking about. I've worked hard for this, and Aunt Sharon believes in me. Why can't you guys? The silence that followed was deafening. My parents just stared at me, completely caught off guard by my outburst. Eric, for once, didn't say anything. He just sat there, looking uncomfortable. I didn't care, though. I'd had enough of being ignored. Enough of being the second thought. I'm going to college, I repeated, quieter this time, but just as firm. With or without your support. I pushed my chair back and left the table. I didn't need their approval anymore. For the first time in my life, I had someone in my corner who believed in me, Aunt Sharon. And that was enough. The next few weeks were a blur. I packed up my things, said goodbye to the few friends I had in town, and got ready for the big move. I still hadn't told my parents much about my plans, and honestly, I didn't feel like I owed them any explanations. This was my time to finally step out of Eric's shadow and make something of myself. When the day came to leave, Aunt Sharon drove me to campus. As we pulled up to the dorms, I felt this overwhelming mix of nerves and excitement. It was the start of something completely new, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take me. As I hugged Aunt Sharon goodbye, I couldn't help but feel grateful. She'd given me the chance I needed, and I wasn't going to waste it. Starting college felt like stepping into a whole new world. I'd never really been away from home for that long, and now I was suddenly surrounded by people my age, all living on their own for the first time. It was exciting, but at the same time, a little overwhelming. When Aunt Sharon dropped me off, I remember standing outside my dorm building, looking at the huge campus in front of me, feeling like I'd finally made it. The first week was a blur of orientations, meeting new people, and trying to get the hang of things. I wasn't exactly the most outgoing person, so I was a bit nervous about making friends. But surprisingly, it wasn't as hard as I thought. Everyone was in the same boat, new place, new faces, so it was easy to strike up conversations in the dining hall or between classes. My roommate Jake was one of those super chill guys who somehow managed to be friends with everyone. He had this laid-back vibe and always seemed to know what was going on around campus. I didn't know it at the time, but having him as a roommate would end up being one of the best things that happened to me during those early days. He was the type of person who would introduce me to everyone, and before I knew it, I had a solid group of friends. But as much as the social part of college was important, I was still there to get a degree. I was determined not to let anything distract me from that. I didn't come all this way just to slack off. The first day of classes, I showed up early, sat in the front row, and took notes like my life depended on it. The professors were intimidating at first, way different from high school teachers, but they seemed to appreciate the effort I was putting in. There was one professor, Dr. Collins, who taught my intro to business class. He was this older guy with a thick beard and a voice that could command an entire lecture hall without a microphone. I remember the first time I raised my hand to ask a question, my heart was pounding. But instead of brushing me off or giving a short answer, Dr. Collins smiled and said, "Good question, Alex," and then went on to explain it in detail. That one small moment was a big deal to me. It felt like validation, like I wasn't just another face in the crowd. That class quickly became my favorite. It wasn't just the subject. Business was what I came here to study. But it was the way Dr. Collins made everything click. He had this way of turning what seemed like complicated concepts into something I could actually wrap my head around. I'd go back to my dorm every day and reread my notes, making sure I understood everything. Jake thought I was a little too intense about it sometimes, but honestly, I didn't care. This was my shot, and I wasn't going to waste it. Speaking of Jake, I have to give the guy credit. He was one of those people who could breeze through classes without really trying, but he never made me feel bad for taking things seriously. He'd joke around about how I was teacher's pet, but it was all in good fun. And when he saw me stressing out about an assignment or a test, he'd actually sit down with me and help me relax a bit. "Dude, it's college," he'd say, tossing a ball of crumpled up paper at me from across the room. "You're supposed to have fun. Don't burn yourself out before midterms." He had a point, but I couldn't help it. There was a lot riding on this for me. This wasn't just about getting a degree. It was about proving to myself that I was more than just the forgotten sibling. Every time I sat down to study or work on a project, it felt like I was pushing back against all the years of being overlooked. I wasn't doing it for my parents or even for Aunt Sharon. I was doing it for me. Still, I did try to loosen up a bit. Jake dragged me out to a few campus events. Nothing too crazy, just stuff like movie nights or hanging out with some people from the dorm. I'll admit, it was nice to step away from the books for a bit and actually enjoy being at college. I started feeling like I belonged there, like I was part of something bigger than just my little world of lectures and textbooks. One of the biggest surprises, though, came from a class project. Dr. Collins had assigned us a group project where we had to come up with a business idea and present it to the class. Group projects weren't really my thing. I'd always been the kid who ended up doing all the work while everyone else slacked off. But this time it was different. My group was made up of 3 other students, Jess, Tyler, and Marcus. Jess was super organized, Tyler was this tech genius, and Marcus had a way with words that made him perfect for presentations. For once, I wasn't the only one pulling my weight. We worked really well together, bouncing ideas off each other and actually listening to each other's input. By the time we presented our idea, a campus delivery service for late-night snacks, we were all feeling pretty confident. The day of the presentation, I was nervous as hell. Public speaking wasn't my strong suit, but I'd practiced my part over and over until I could recite it in my sleep. When we got up there, though, everything clicked. Jess nailed the intro, Tyler's tech demo worked perfectly, and Marcus wrapped it all up with this killer closing statement. I did my part without stumbling, and when we finished, the class actually clapped. Dr. Collins gave us a nod of approval, and I swear, it felt like winning the lottery. That project ended up being a turning point for me. Not only did we get an A, but it also made me realize that I was capable of more than I thought. I wasn't just the quiet kid in the background anymore. I was part of a team, and I'd contributed something meaningful. It was a huge confidence boost, and it pushed me to keep going, to keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone. By the end of that first semester, I felt like I was finally hitting my stride. I wasn't just surviving college, I was thriving. Sure, there were still moments where I doubted myself, and yeah, I missed Aunt Sharon and the comfort of her house sometimes, but I was building something here, something that was mine. I guess what I'm trying to say is, college was more than just classes and grades for me. It was the first time I felt like I had control over my life, like I was the one deciding who I was going to be. And even though there were still challenges ahead, I knew I could handle it. For the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. So, after college, I did what any recent graduate does. I found a job. It wasn't anything flashy, but it was steady, and I was grateful for it. It gave me the chance to save up and figure out what I wanted to do next. I knew from the start that working for someone else wasn't going to cut it for me long term. I had bigger plans. That's when the idea of opening my own restaurant started brewing in my head. I've always loved cooking, and the idea of running my own place just felt right. I kept thinking about what it would be like to have my own spot, where people would come in for good food and a welcoming atmosphere. After a couple of years of working and saving, I finally took the leap. I opened my first restaurant in a small but busy part of town. It wasn't anything fancy at first, just a cozy little place with a simple menu. But people started coming, and before I knew it, the business was taking off. Running a restaurant isn't easy, though. Those first few months were insane. I barely had time to breathe between managing the kitchen, serving customers, and handling all the behind-the-scenes stuff. But despite the long hours and stress, I loved it. It felt like I was finally doing something that was mine, something I built from the ground up. And when it started getting popular, that was just the icing on the cake. As the restaurant grew, I took the next big step, opening another branch. It felt like a dream. I never imagined I'd have more than one place, but there I was, expanding the business and watching it thrive. Eventually, I had a few locations around town, and things were going better than I could have hoped for. I had a solid team of employees, and the restaurants were making a good profit. Life was pretty good. And then, as if on cue, my parents came back into the picture. It started with a phone call from my mom. I hadn't heard much from her or my dad in a while, not since I'd gone off to college. We'd been keeping our distance, which honestly was fine by me. But suddenly there they were, back again, asking for a favor. "Alex, sweetie, how are you doing? It's been so long," Mom said, her voice all sweet and full of fake enthusiasm. I could tell something was up immediately. "I'm fine, Mom. Busy with the restaurants," I replied, keeping it short. I knew there was more to this call than just a friendly check-in. "Well, we're so proud of you. You know that, right?" she said, her voice edging toward what I could only describe as desperation. "But, um, we were wondering if you could do us a little favor? It's about Eric." Of course, it was about Eric. It's always about Eric. I let her continue, even though I already had a good idea of where this was going. "You know, he's been struggling to find work lately. He's applied everywhere, but no one's hiring him," she explained. "He's had some issues at his last few jobs, and now it's like no one will give him a chance. We were hoping maybe you could help him out. Give him a job at one of your restaurants?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Eric, the golden child who could do no wrong, had apparently messed up so many times that even his charm couldn't land him a job anymore. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind them of all the times they put Eric on a pedestal while ignoring everything I did, but I knew that wasn't going to help anyone. So against my better judgment, I agreed. "Fine, Mom. I can give him a job," I said, my voice a little more tired than I wanted it to be. But he's going to have to work as a waiter. No special treatment. He needs to actually do the job. Oh, thank you, Alex. You don't know how much this means to us, she gushed, like I'd just saved the world. He'll be so grateful. Grateful? Eric? Yeah, right. When Eric showed up to start work, it was awkward, to say the least. He acted like he was doing me a favor by being there. Like I should be grateful for him gracing my restaurant with his presence. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, giving him a job when no one else would hire him, and he acted like he was above it. But I kept my cool and treated him like any other employee. Surprisingly, he didn't do a terrible job. He wasn't great either, but he showed up, did what was required, and didn't cause too many issues. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than I expected. Things stayed pretty calm for a while after that, but then my parents called again. This time the favor was even bigger. Alex, we need to talk, my dad said, sounding more serious than usual. We're in some financial trouble and we need your help. Of course they were. Apparently they had blown through all their savings. Between Eric's endless adventures, his failed business ideas, the college he never finished, and whatever other nonsense he got into, they had nothing left. They'd spent it all, and now they were looking to me to bail them out. At this point, I should have been used to it. I should have known that they'd come to me eventually, especially after years of pouring everything into Eric. But it still hurt. It still felt like they were only coming to me because they had no other option, not because they actually valued me or cared about what I'd achieved. I could have said no. I could have told them to figure it out on their own, that I wasn't their safety net. But for some reason, I didn't. Maybe part of me still wanted to help, even after everything. Or maybe I just didn't want to see them completely fall apart. So, once again, I agreed. I started sending them a monthly allowance, just enough to help them get by. I wasn't going to cover all of their expenses, but I didn't want them to lose their home, or be out on the street either. It felt like the right thing to do, even though it left a bitter taste in my mouth. And of course, there was Eric still working at the restaurant, still getting by without any real consequences for the messes he'd made. My parents didn't ask him to contribute or to help them out. They just let him keep doing his thing, while I was the one stepping up, as always. In the end, I couldn't help but wonder how things had turned out this way. I'd built something real, something successful, and yet here I was, still cleaning up after the golden child, still giving my parents the help they needed because they'd blown everything on him. But for now, it was what it was. At least I had my restaurants, my business. I'd created something that was mine, and no one could take that away from me. One afternoon, I was at the restaurant going over some invoices and prepping for the upcoming week. It was a normal day, busy, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Sharon. Now, Aunt Sharon doesn't call me much unless there's something important, so right away I knew something was up. Hey, Aunt Sharon, I said, trying to keep my voice light, even though I was already bracing myself for whatever news she had. Alex, sweetie, you need to see this video, she said, her voice serious. It's from a family party your parents were at last weekend. Someone posted it online and, well, I think you should take a look. My stomach dropped. A video? Of my parents? It didn't sound good. What's it about? I asked, trying to get a sense of what I was walking into. Just watch it. I'm sending you the link right now. Call me after, she said, sounding almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure how I'd react. I opened the link Aunt Sharon sent, and the first thing I saw was my parents, clearly drunk, holding drinks and swaying slightly as they stood in front of a group of people. There was loud music in the background, and the camera was shaky, but I could hear every word they were saying. My mom started talking first. You know, everyone thinks Alex built those restaurants on their own, but really it was all Eric, she slurred, waving her hand dramatically. Eric's the real genius behind it all. He's the one who gave Alex that nice job. He works so hard, running around all day making sure everything's perfect while Alex just sits back and manages things. I blinked, not sure if I'd heard that right. Did she really just say Eric was the one who gave me a job? Eric, who couldn't hold down a job anywhere else, was supposedly the mastermind behind my restaurant business? I was so stunned I almost paused the video, but then my dad chimed in. And you know what else? My dad said, his face flushed and his words slurred. We gave Alex money to start those restaurants. We helped them get off the ground. But does Alex ever thank us? No, ungrateful little freeloader. He practically spat the last word, his face twisting in disgust. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were my parents, my own parents, standing there at a family party, drunk out of their minds, telling everyone that I was a freeloader, that I'd only made it because of Eric and their supposed financial help. I felt my blood boiling. The restaurant was mine. I'd built it from scratch. Me, not Eric, not them. They hadn't given me a dime. and now they were standing there rewriting history like I was some useless leech riding on their coattails. As the video continued, my mom rambled on about how Eric was so humble and didn't take credit for everything he did for me. He could have opened his own business, she said with a slurred giggle. But he's too kind. He just wants to help Alex succeed. That's the kind of brother he is. I felt sick. Eric, who could barely manage to be a waiter, was now apparently the brains behind my entire business, and they were acting like he was some kind of saint for letting me run the restaurants while he quietly did all the real work. It was beyond absurd. It was insulting. It was a flat-out lie. By the time the video ended, my hands were shaking with anger. I couldn't believe they'd do this, talking behind my back, making me look like a joke in front of the whole family, and they didn't even think twice about it, like it was just some casual conversation, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. I'd worked my entire life to get to where I was. I'd busted my ass to make something of myself, while Eric had screwed up every opportunity he'd ever had. And now, after everything, they were giving him the credit and calling me the freeloader? I couldn't let this slide. I grabbed my phone and called my parents, my heart pounding as the phone rang. My mom answered, sounding cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Alex, how are you, sweetie?" I didn't bother with small talk. "I saw the video," I said, my voice cold and shaking with barely contained anger. There was a pause on the other end, and I could practically hear her scrambling to come up with a response. "What video?" she asked, her voice suddenly wary. "The one from the party," I snapped. "The one where you and Dad are telling everyone that I'm a freeloader and that Eric is the real reason I've been successful." "Oh, that," she said, trying to laugh it off. "Alex, you know we were just joking. It was all in good fun. We'd had a few drinks and—" "You called me a freeloader," I cut her off, my voice rising. "You said Eric was the one who gave me a job, that you gave me money to start the restaurants. Do you realize how insulting that is? I built this business on my own without any help from you or Eric, and you're standing there telling people it's all because of him?" She started to stammer, but I didn't give her a chance to continue. "I've had enough," I said, my voice hard. "I'm done with this. I'm done with the lies, the manipulation, all of it. Don't call me. Don't ask me for anything. You're cut off, for good." "Alex, wait, we didn't mean—" she tried to say, but I hung up before she could finish. I sat there for a minute, my phone still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. I'd always known my relationship with my parents was messed up, but this? This was the final straw. They had crossed a line that I couldn't forgive. Aunt Sharon called me later that day to check in. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Alex," she said, her voice full of sympathy. "I don't know what they were thinking." "They weren't," I replied, feeling drained. "But it doesn't matter anymore. I'm done with them." After I hung up with Aunt Sharon, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't weighed down by the constant pressure to make my parents happy, to live up to their impossible expectations, or to clean up their messes. I was free. I'd made my own success, and I didn't owe them a thing. Story 4. This story is titled, "My Wife Cheated with Her Ex on Our Wedding Day, Thinking I Never Know." Now she's alone at the altar as I walked out. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, big news, I've launched a new Reddit channel. This time the background isn't Minecraft. It's Subway Surfers in a Christmas theme to match the season. Check it out, subscribe, and join the fun. Links in the description. See you there. Now let's start the video. Alright, so here's the deal. I'm Ryan, 30 years old, living in San Diego, and for the longest time I thought I had everything figured out. I was getting married to Sabrina, my girlfriend of 3 years, and honestly, life seemed pretty damn good. She was gorgeous, super outgoing, and could light up a room when she walked in. Everyone who met her would say things like, "Man, you're lucky," and I believed them. I mean, who wouldn't? On paper, she seemed perfect. We planned this big wedding. Like, I'm talking all out. Beachfront venue, fancy catering, a live band, you name it, we had it. It wasn't cheap, but I thought it was worth it. You only get married once, right? Well, at least that's what I thought at the time. But about a week before the wedding, Sabrina started acting different. At first, I brushed it off. Weddings are stressful, Between the guest lists, the decorations, the seating charts. Yeah, it's a lot. But her behavior wasn't just stress. It was something else. She'd suddenly get super secretive with her phone, like always flipping it over when she set it down or stepping out of the room to take calls. I didn't really say anything at first because, honestly, I didn't want to come across as some paranoid fiancé. That's not me. Then one night she was in the shower and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the screen lit up and a name popped up. Jason. Now for a second I thought, who the hell is Jason? And then it hit me. It's her ex. Yeah, that Jason. The one she swore was out of her life ages ago. The message wasn't long. It just said, "Looking forward to tonight." That's it. And I'll admit, my stomach twisted a little. I mean, why was she making plans with her ex a few days before our wedding? But then I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe she was helping him out with something. Sabrina's always been the type to help people. So I decided to just ask her. Later that night, when she was out of the shower and we were getting ready for bed, I said, "Hey, so Jason texted you earlier. What's that about?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, Jason? Yeah, he's just going through some stuff. I've been checking in on him. It's no big deal." She said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. And maybe it was. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. I didn't push, though. I figured I'd let it go for now. But after that, things started adding up. She'd tell me she was going to meet her maid of honor to go over wedding details, but wouldn't give me much info. She'd get super defensive if I asked too many questions, saying I was stressing her out or making things harder than they needed to be. And I'll admit, I started to wonder if I was overthinking things. Like, was I being that guy? The one who turns every little thing into a big deal? I didn't want to be that guy. Still, the phone thing kept bothering me. It wasn't just Jason. She'd get a ton of texts, and every time she'd immediately hide her phone or act like she didn't hear it. One time, I even joked, "What, you got a secret admirer or something?" She just laughed it off, but the way she avoided eye contact? Yeah, that stuck with me. Then came the night that really kicked things up a notch. Sabrina told me she was meeting her maid of honor, Grace, at a cafe to finalize some wedding stuff. It sounded normal enough, and I didn't think twice about it. I stayed home, watched some TV, and was just about to crash when my best man Eric called. "Yo, Ryan, are you busy?" he asked, sounding kind of hesitant. "No, what's up?" I replied, a little confused. He paused for a second. "Look, man, I don't know if I should say anything, but I'm at Shimon Bar right now, and I just saw Sabrina here." "Okay, and?" I said, not really understanding the problem. "She's not with Grace," Eric said slowly. "She's with some guy. And I'm pretty sure it's Jason." That caught my attention. "Jason? Like, her ex Jason?" "Yeah, man. They're sitting in a booth in the corner. It doesn't look like they're talking about centerpieces, if you know what I mean." For a moment, I didn't even know what to say. Sabrina was out with her ex at a bar when she told me she was meeting her friend? What the hell was going on? Eric must have sensed my silence because he added, "I'm sorry, dude. I thought you should know. I can send you a picture if you want." I told him to send it, and when it came through, my heart dropped. There she was, sitting way too close to Jason, her hand on his arm, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I thanked Eric and hung up. After Eric's call, I couldn't get the image of that photo out of my head. Sabrina and Jason sitting in that booth, way too close, way too comfortable. She wasn't just meeting up with an old friend. It looked intimate, and we both knew it. I stayed up half the night trying to figure out what the hell to do. Part of me wanted to storm down to the bar right then, but I knew that wasn't the move. I needed to see this for what it was and not let my emotions take over. The next day, Sabrina acted like nothing had happened. She was cheerful, humming some song while making coffee in the kitchen, like she wasn't out cozying up to her ex the night before. "Morning, babe," she said with that same bright smile that used to make me melt. Now, it just made me question everything. I played along. "Morning. How was your meeting with Grace?" She didn't even hesitate. "Oh, it was great. We went over some last-minute stuff for the seating chart. She's such a lifesaver, honestly." She sipped her coffee and started scrolling on her phone like it was just another day. It hit me then. She was a damn good liar. The way she spoke, the way she moved, it was all so natural, so confident. If Eric hadn't called me, I would have bought every word. That pissed me off more than anything. I didn't press her right then. I wanted to see how far she'd take the lie. So I asked, "Did you guys stay at the cafe the whole time? Seemed like you were out pretty late." "Oh yeah," she said casually. "We stayed there for a while, and then I dropped her off at her place. It was just a long night." "A long night, huh?" I nodded, biting my tongue to keep from saying something I'd regret. Later that day, I called Eric to get more details. "What else did you see? Did they leave together?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Nah, man. They were still there when I left," Eric said. "But they looked real comfortable. Like, if you didn't know she was engaged, you'd think they were together." That stung. I thanked him and hung up, but my head was spinning. I couldn't just let this slide, but I also didn't want to jump the gun. That evening, Sabrina told me she was going out again. Another wedding errand with Grace. This time, I wasn't letting it go. "Cool," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Where are you guys meeting?" "Just at her place," she said quickly, grabbing her purse. Something about the way she answered made me pause. "All right, say hi to her for me." She gave me a quick peck on the cheek and walked out the door. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my keys and called Eric. I'm going to Shoreline, I told him. Dude, are you sure? What if she's not even there this time? I have to know, I said. I parked a block away from the bar and walked in, trying to keep my cool. The place was crowded, the usual mix of college kids and locals. It took me a minute to spot her, but there she was, back in the same corner booth with Jason. They looked even more comfortable this time. She was leaning toward him, laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his. My stomach turned. This wasn't just some innocent conversation. I didn't confront her right then and there. They were in their own little bubble, completely oblivious to the world around them. It was like I didn't even exist. At one point, Jason leaned in close, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh and lightly shove his shoulder. I clenched my fists under the counter, trying to keep myself in check. I stayed for about 20 minutes before I couldn't take it anymore. I left without saying anything, drove home, and sat in my car for what felt like hours. I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do. We were getting married in a few days. How do you even begin to deal with something like this? By the time Sabrina came home, I'd calmed down enough to play it cool. She walked in, all smiles, and said, "Hey, Grace says hi, by the way." I nodded, barely looking up from my phone. "Oh, cool. Did you guys get everything figured out?" "Yep," she said, kicking off her shoes. "Just a few more things to finalize, and we're good to go." I couldn't believe how easily she lied. She didn't miss a beat. That night, I barely slept again. I kept replaying what I'd seen at the bar, trying to make sense of it. How did she dare cheating on me? The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I called Eric and told him everything. "Dude, you've got to talk to her," he said. "You can't just let this go. If she's doing this now, what's going to happen after you're married?" He was right, but I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more information, more proof, so I decided to wait and see what she'd do next. Over the next few days, Sabrina kept up the act. She'd smile, laugh, and talk about the wedding like nothing was wrong. But every time her phone buzzed, I felt my blood boil. I knew Jason was still in the picture, and I knew she wasn't being honest with me. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, I was barely holding it together. Sabrina's family was all smiles, talking about how excited they were for the big day. My family, on the other hand, could tell something was off. My mom pulled me aside at one point and asked, "Are you okay? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I lied. But I wasn't fine. I was furious, and I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. All right, so by this point, I was done sitting around and letting Sabrina play me. I was tired of the fake smiles, the lies, and her acting like everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. I mean, I'm not an idiot. I could see exactly what was happening. But now it was time for her to see that I wasn't someone she could keep stringing along. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up feeling like today was the day I'd finally say something. I couldn't keep this bottled up anymore. She was still in bed when I got up, scrolling on her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I stared at her for a moment, wondering if she even felt guilty for sneaking around with her ex. Did she think I wouldn't find out? Or did she just think I'd forgive her no matter what? Either way, she was about to find out she was dead wrong. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk." She looked up, slightly confused but not alarmed. "Sure. What's up?" I sat down across from her, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "Where were you the other night? And don't tell me you were with Grace because we both know that's not true." Her face froze for a split second before she forced a smile. "What do you mean?" "I told you, I was with Grace working on wedding stuff." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Cut the crap, Sabrina. Eric saw you. With Jason." Her jaw dropped slightly, and I could see the panic start to creep into her expression. "Wait, what? That's not true," she stammered. "Eric must have been mistaken." "Don't lie to me," I said firmly. "He wasn't mistaken. He even sent me a photo. You were sitting in a booth with Jason, laughing, touching his arm. So tell me, what the hell is going on?" She sat there for a moment, completely silent, as if she was trying to come up with some kind of excuse. Finally, she sighed and said, "Okay, fine. Yes, I saw Jason. But it's not what you think." "Not what I think," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You've been sneaking around with your ex, lying to me about where you've been, and spending time at a bar with him instead of working on wedding plans. So tell me, Sabrina, what exactly is it?" She started to tear up, which I knew was her go-to move whenever she got caught doing something wrong. "Ryan, it's not like that," she said, her voice shaking. "Jason reached out to me a while ago. He's been going through a lot, and he just needed someone to talk to. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd overreact." "Overreact?" I said, my voice rising. "You're meeting up with your ex days before our wedding and lying to me about it, and you think I'm overreacting?" Her tears started to flow now, and she reached out to grab my hand. "Please, Ryan, You have to believe me. I love you. I don't have feelings for Jason. I was just trying to help him. I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. You don't lie to someone you love, Sabrina. And you sure as hell don't sneak around with your ex behind their back. Do you even hear yourself right now? She started to panic, realizing I wasn't buying her bullshit. Ryan, please. It was a mistake, okay? I shouldn't have seen him, but it didn't mean anything. I swear I stood up, unable to sit there and listen to her try to spin this anymore. You don't accidentally meet up with someone multiple times, Sabrina. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. And honestly, it's pretty damn clear where your priorities are. She jumped up too, trying to block me from leaving the room. Wait, please don't walk away. We can fix this. I'll stop talking to him. I'll block his number. Just don't give up on us. I paused, staring at her for a moment. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that maybe this was just some stupid mistake she'd made in a moment of weakness. But the other part of me, the part that had been watching her lie straight to my face for weeks, knew better. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice quieter now. She hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. A couple of weeks, she finally admitted. But it wasn't anything serious. We just talked, I swear. I let out a bitter laugh. Do you even hear yourself? You're supposed to be marrying me, and you're sneaking around with a guy you used to date, and you think I'm supposed to just believe it's no big deal? It wasn't like that, she insisted, her voice desperate now. I made a mistake, okay? But it's you I want to be with. Please don't let this ruin everything. I shook my head, stepping past her and heading for the door. Sabrina, you already ruined everything. I don't even know who you are anymore. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, and got in my car. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get out of there and clear my head. When I finally pulled over, I called Eric and told him what happened. Dude, she admitted to it, I said, my voice shaking with anger. She's been seeing Jason for weeks. Ryan, I'm so sorry, man, Eric said. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. I don't know yet. But I can't just let this slide. There's no way I'm marrying her now. Eric was quiet for a moment before he said, Look, whatever you decide, just know I've got your back. You don't deserve this, man. Hearing that meant a lot, but it didn't make the situation any easier. I knew I had some tough decisions to make, and I knew the fallout from this was going to be messy. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let Sabrina or Jason make a fool out of me. I spent the rest of that day driving around aimlessly, trying to process everything. Sabrina wasn't just lying to me. She was living a completely different life behind my back. And the worst part? She had the audacity to keep acting like everything was fine. Like we were still the perfect couple everyone thought we were. When I finally got back to the apartment, she wasn't there. Good. The wedding was only 2 days away, and I knew I had to make a decision. Do I go through with it and hope this was just a stupid mistake? Or do I call it off and deal with the fallout? The thing is, calling off a wedding isn't just about you and the other person. It's about the guests, the families, the money you've already spent. It felt like an avalanche waiting to happen. But as much as I hated the idea of disappointing everyone, I hated the thought of marrying someone who didn't respect me even more. That night, Sabrina came home late, as usual. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, when she walked in. She looked surprised to see me there. Hey, she said, forcing a smile. You're up late. Yeah, I said, not looking at her. Couldn't sleep. She paused, probably sensing the tension in the room. Listen, about earlier, she started, but I cut her off. Save it, Sabrina. I don't want to hear it right now. My voice was calm, but firm. I wasn't in the mood for another round of her excuses. She stood there for a moment, then sighed and walked into the bedroom. I stayed on the couch, staring into the darkness, trying to figure out how did the person I thought I was going to spend my life with turn out to be such a liar. It wasn't even just about Jason anymore. It was about trust. And once that's gone, what's left? The next morning, Sabrina acted like nothing had happened. She came out of the bedroom, already dressed and ready to tackle another day of wedding errands. She poured herself a cup of coffee and started scrolling on her phone, completely ignoring the elephant in the room. So, what's the plan for today? I asked, trying to sound casual. I wanted to see if she'd even bother to tell me the truth. She looked up, startled. Just some last-minute stuff with Grace, she said quickly. We're going to pick up the centerpieces and make sure the venue is set up the way we want it. I nodded, playing along. Sounds important. Need any help? She laughed nervously. No, we've got it covered. You just relax and get ready for the big day. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek before grabbing her bag and heading out the door. The second she was gone, I felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger because she was still lying to my face, and relief because I didn't have to deal with her for a few hours. Eric called me. Man, what's your plan? I paused, staring out the window. I don't know yet. But I'm not going to let her get away with this. She thinks she can just walk all over me and I'll still marry her? She's in for a rude awakening. Eric laughed. Now that sounds like the Ryan I know. Just let me know if you need backup. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the day thinking about how to handle this. I wanted to confront her in front of everyone at the wedding, to expose her lies and make her feel the humiliation she deserved. This wasn't just about her. It was about me taking control of my life and refusing to settle for less than I deserved. When Sabrina came home that evening, she was all smiles again. Everything's coming together perfectly, she said, dropping her bag on the counter. I think this is going to be the best day of our lives. I forced a smile, trying to hide my frustration. That's great, I said. I'm glad everything's working out. She came over and wrapped her arms around me, resting her head on my chest. I love you, Ryan. I know things have been stressful lately, but I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. Her words felt hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. I didn't say anything, just stood there until she let go and went to take a shower. As I sat there, I realized something. I didn't love her anymore. Or maybe I did, but not in the way I used to. The trust was gone. And without that, what was left? A pretty face and a lot of broken promises? That wasn't enough for me. The night before the wedding, Sabrina was in the bedroom, probably dreaming about walking down the aisle while I was on the couch, thinking about how I was going to handle the next day. I knew I couldn't marry her, but I also knew I needed to make my decision clear in a way she couldn't ignore. By morning, I had a strange sense of calm. I wasn't nervous or angry anymore. I was just ready. Ready to stand up for myself. Ready to put an end to this farce. And ready to walk away from someone who didn't deserve me. Sabrina was buzzing with excitement as we got ready to head to the venue. Can you believe it? In a few hours, we're going to be husband and wife, she said, beaming. I forced another smile. Yeah, hard to believe. She didn't notice the edge in my voice, too wrapped up in her own little world. But that was fine. She'd notice soon enough. I played along, answering questions when I needed to, nodding at her dad when he gave me his "don't screw this up" look, and shaking hands with guests as they arrived. It was like I was on autopilot. Inside, I was just waiting for the right moment. When I walked into the ceremony area, the setup was breathtaking. White chairs lined up in perfect rows, flowers everywhere, and the ocean as the backdrop. It looked like something straight out of a magazine. It should have felt special, but all I could think was, how much of this money did I just waste? Guests were slowly filing in, chatting and laughing, oblivious to the disaster brewing. My groomsmen were in place, all looking sharp in their suits. Eric gave me a nod, silently asking if I was okay. I nodded back. No turning back now. Sabrina's family was all smiles, greeting everyone, talking about how excited they were for the big moment. It made me sick. Her dad even came over and patted me on the shoulder. You ready to officially join the family, son? I forced a smile. Absolutely, I said, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. The music started, and everyone took their seats. Sabrina's bridesmaids made their way down the aisle, looking like they were in some romantic movie. I barely noticed them. I was too focused on what I was about to do. My heart wasn't racing, my hands weren't shaking. I was steady, ready. Then the music shifted to the classic wedding march, and everyone stood. Sabrina appeared at the end of the aisle, her arm hooked around her dad's. All I could see was a liar, a manipulator, someone who had no problem sneaking around with her ex while I was at home planning our future. It was like her appearance was a mask, hiding the person I now knew her to be. She finally made it to the altar, standing across from me with that big, radiant smile. Her dad gave me a firm handshake and whispered, "Take good care of her." I just nodded, too focused on what was about to happen. The officiant began his opening remarks, talking about love, commitment, and the sanctity of marriage. I barely heard a word. I was waiting for my moment. He turned to me and asked the first question. Ryan, do you take Sabrina to be your lawfully wedded wife? I took a deep breath, looking Sabrina directly in the eye. Her smile faltered slightly as she noticed the look on my face. I'm sorry, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but I can't do this. The crowd gasped. A few people murmured, and Sabrina's smile disappeared entirely. What are you doing? She whispered, her voice trembling. I ignored her and turned to the guests. I need to be honest with all of you, I said, my voice steady. Sabrina hasn't been honest with me. For weeks now, she's been sneaking around with her ex, Jason. She lied to me, lied to her friends, and lied to all of you. The murmurs grew louder. Sabrina's mom looked like she was about to faint, while her dad's face turned beet red. The bridesmaids exchanged shocked glances, and my groomsmen just stood there, frozen. Eric, though, looked proud, like he'd been waiting for this moment almost as much as I had. Sabrina grabbed my arm, her eyes wide and full of tears. Ryan, stop! Please don't do this. You're making a mistake. I pulled my arm away, looking at her like she was a stranger. No, Sabrina. You made the mistake. You made it the moment you decided to see Jason behind my back. You made it every time you lied to my face. I deserve better than this. She started crying, full on sobbing now, but I wasn't moved. The crowd was dead silent, all eyes on us. It was like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Ryan, please, she begged, her voice breaking. I love you. I'll fix this. Just don't leave me. I shook my head. Love isn't sneaking around with your ex. Love isn't lying to the person you're supposed to spend your life with. If this is what you call love, I don't want it. She tried to grab my arm again, but I stepped back. You can cry all you want, Sabrina, but this is over. I'm done. I turned to the officiant, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Sorry for wasting your time, I said, before walking down the aisle past the stunned crowd. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The damage was done. As I walked out of the venue, I felt a strange sense of relief. Sure, I was leaving behind a mess, a really expensive mess, but it was worth it. I dodged a bullet, and I knew it. If she was willing to lie to me before we even got married, what would she do after? Back at my car, I sat for a moment, taking it all in. My phone was blowing up with texts and calls. Sabrina, her mom, even a couple of her bridesmaids, but I ignored them. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I'd said my piece. Eric was the first one to call, and I actually answered. Dude, that was badass, he said, laughing. You okay? Yeah, I said, finally allowing myself to smile. Better than I've been in weeks. You want me to grab some drinks and come over? I think you've earned it. Yeah, man. I'll see you in a bit. As I drove away from the venue, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Sure, I'd just blown up what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but it was better than living a lie. Sabrina would have to deal with the consequences of her actions, and I'd get to start fresh, knowing I made the right choice. When I got home, Eric showed up about 20 minutes later, a six-pack in hand. Man, he said, walking through the door. That was insane. You really pulled the plug in front of everyone, huh? I nodded, slumping onto the couch. Had to. She left me no choice. Eric cracked open a can and handed it to me. You should have seen their faces. Her dad looked like he was about to charge the altar. And her bridesmaids? They were whispering to each other the whole time like it was a reality show. I smirked. Good. Let them talk. She earned it. The voicemails were exactly what I expected. Sabrina's voice was shaky and desperate, alternating between apologies and excuses. Ryan, please call me back. We can fix this. I know I messed up, but we can work through it. Her mom's message was more aggressive. Ryan, how dare you humiliate my daughter like that? You couldn't have handled this in private? You owe her an apology. I rolled my eyes and deleted the messages without even finishing them. I didn't owe anyone an apology. If anything, Sabrina owed me one, for wasting my time, for lying, for thinking she could get away with it. A few days passed, and the fallout started spreading. Word got around quickly, especially after Eric shared the photo he took of Sabrina and Jason at the bar with a few mutual friends. I didn't ask him to, but I wasn't mad about it either. People deserve to know the truth, especially after Sabrina's mom started spinning the story like I was the bad guy. Apparently, Sabrina's version of events was that I'd snapped under wedding pressure and left her at the altar because I couldn't handle the stress. That didn't sit well with me, but I didn't have to say much to set the record straight. The photo of her and Jason said it all. Once people saw that, her excuses fell apart. One of her bridesmaids, Lauren, even reached out to me. Ryan, I'm so sorry, she said over the phone. I had no idea she was doing that to you. If I'd known, I would have said something. It's fine, I said, not really wanting to get into it. I'm just glad it's over. But Lauren wasn't done. Honestly, Sabrina's been acting sketchy for weeks. Grace and I noticed she'd disappear a lot during wedding stuff, but she'd always say it was just personal errands. I feel bad now for not questioning it. Don't. It's not your fault, I said, and I meant it. I wasn't going to waste time being mad at anyone but Sabrina. As for Jason, well, his involvement didn't last long. Apparently, after the wedding disaster, Sabrina tried to lean on him for support. Big surprise. He wasn't interested. He'd been all smiles and charm when they were sneaking around behind my back, but the moment things got real, he ghosted her. A mutual friend told me he blocked her on social media and stopped answering her calls. Classy guy. Sabrina tried reaching out to me again, this time through texts. Her messages were full of emotions, apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas. One text would say, I'm so sorry, Ryan. I know I messed up, but I love you and I want to make this right. The next would say, you're being so unfair. Everyone thinks I'm a monster now because of you. I ignored every single one. What was the point? She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. Big difference. A week after the wedding, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I wasn't surprised. It felt like something she'd do. I opened the door, and there she was, looking like a mess. Her hair was tied back in a sloppy bun, and her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying for hours. "Brian, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "What do you want, Sabrina?" She hesitated, like she wasn't sure how to start. I I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I screwed up. But I want to fix this." I stared at her, not saying anything. Let her squirm a little. "I'll do whatever it takes," she continued, her voice breaking. "I'll block Jason. I'll go to therapy. I'll I'll do anything. Just give me another chance." I shook my head slowly. "Sabrina, you don't get it, do you? This isn't about blocking Jason or going to therapy. It's about trust. And you destroyed that. There's no coming back from this." She stood there, silent, her tears falling harder. I felt a small pang of pity for her, but it wasn't enough to change my mind. "Go home, Sabrina," I said, stepping back into the apartment. "And don't come back." Before she could say anything else, I closed the door and locked it. As the weeks went on, Sabrina's attempts to contact me slowed down. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Word got around about what happened, and people started distancing themselves from her. Even her closest friends started to see her for who she really was. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Walking away from Sabrina was the best decision I ever made. She showed me exactly who she was, and I believed her. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you should never settle for less than you deserve. Life's too short for that. And Sabrina? Well, last I heard, she's still single. Jason didn't stick around, and her friends don't trust her anymore. I guess she's got plenty of time now to think about the choices she made. Me? I'm just glad I walked away. Best decision of my life. Story 5. Cut out of the will by mom and stepdad. Because I'm not family, but now that I've inherited $3 million, suddenly they want me back. So let's start from the beginning. When I was 14, my life took a sharp turn. My mom decided it was time to settle down again, this time with a man who already had a son from his previous marriage. He was 17, 3 years older than me, and let's just say we didn't exactly hit it off from the start. The ink wasn't even dry on their marriage certificate when tensions started to brew. At first, it was the small stuff. You know, the kind of petty arguments you'd expect when you throw strangers into a house and tell them they're family now. He'd leave his dirty dishes in the sink like they'd magically clean themselves, and I'd be the one getting an earful about the mess in the kitchen. Or I'd find my shampoo mysteriously vanishing faster than usual, only to see my new stepbrother sporting what looked suspiciously like my favorite hair product. It wasn't just the stepbrother antics that got to me, it was how my stepdad handled things. He had this way of just assuming I was the root of all problems. If something was out of place, somehow it was my doing. And mom? She wasn't much help either. She was so caught up in trying to make this new family work that she'd overlook the obvious, always smoothing things over, making excuses for why my stepbrother could do no wrong. A year into this new family setup, mom and stepdad had news they were expecting. That's when the dynamic really shifted. Suddenly, it was all about preparing for the new baby. The house needed redecorating, and guess whose room was conveniently chosen for the nursery? Yep, mine. So I got shuffled to the smaller guest room, which barely had space for my stuff. It felt like a demotion, a clear message about where I stood in this family hierarchy. As my new half-brother grew up, it became apparent that he was the golden child. My stepbrother, already spoiled, seemed to take cues from this and upped his entitled behavior, knowing he could get away with anything. He dropped out of college and came back home bringing a whirlwind of trouble with him, from late-night parties to dodgy friends coming and going at all hours. Complaints? Met with a shrug from stepdad and sorrowful looks from mom, as if to say, "What can we do?" I started spending more time at friends' houses, anywhere I could feel a bit normal. School became my escape. I joined clubs, stayed late for extra classes, anything to avoid going home before I absolutely had to. This wasn't just teenage rebellion, it was survival. The atmosphere at home was suffocating, like constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for the next blow-up. One particular evening stands out in my memory. I had come home later than usual after a school project. The house was quiet, too quiet, which was unusual. I found a note on the fridge saying they'd gone out for dinner, a family dinner I wasn't told about. It was a simple message, but it hit me hard. It was as if they'd forgotten I existed unless I was there to be blamed for something. The breaking point came not long after my 18th birthday. I'd saved up some money from a part-time job, a job I got despite stepdad's complaints about how it would affect my studies, which was just another way of saying he didn't like not having me around to pin things on. I came home one day to find my room turned upside down. Stepbrother had thrown a party while the parents were out, and somehow my room became the casualty. Beer stains on my project papers, a broken lamp, and my privacy completely violated. I confronted them all at breakfast the next day. Stepdad's response? Cold and dismissive, saying I should have been more responsible with my belongings. Mom just sighed and mentioned something about family sticking together and letting things go. But I was done letting things go. During those teenage years, it seemed like everything I did was under a microscope, but not in the caring, let's help you grow kind of way. More like, let's catch you doing something wrong. My stepbrother, who had become pretty much a professional couch potato, was somehow always off the hook. My little half-brother was just a kid, sure, but the amount of coddling he got made it clear who the favorites were. I remember working on a big science project that I was really excited about. I needed quiet and space, both of which were in short supply at home. I tried to set up a little workspace in the corner of the living room, but it was like I had set up in the middle of Times Square. My stepbrother would blast his music, my little brother would be running around screaming, and there was my stepdad, always finding some reason to tell me to move my stuff. "You're taking up too much space," he'd say, or "Your project is making a mess." It was frustrating. I felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the middle of a tornado. One day, I'd had enough. I packed up my project and marched over to a friend's house. Her parents were always welcoming, and they let me spread out my work in their quiet dining room. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I could think straight. That's when it hit me how abnormal my home life had become. My friend noticed my relief at just being able to work in peace. "You're always welcome here," she said one day, seeing the stress melt off me the minute I stepped into her house. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. It also made me realize that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. Home should be your safe place, not somewhere you escape from. I started picking up more shifts at my part-time job. If I wasn't at school or at a friend's place, I was working. Not just for the money, but because each hour away from home was a little easier to breathe. My stepdad didn't like it, always ranting about how a job was distracting me from schoolwork. But I knew the real reason he didn't like it. I wasn't around as much for him to find fault with. As I saved up, the plan to move out started forming more solidly in my mind. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There was no way my mom and stepdad would take it well. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only way I could get some control over my life. Then came the day I finally told them. I'd found a small apartment not too far from college, and it was affordable on my budget. I sat them down, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm moving out," I announced. The room went quiet. Too quiet. You could cut the tension with a knife. My stepdad was the first to react. "You think you're ready to live on your own, at your age?" he scoffed. My mom just sat there, looking between us, her face unreadable. "I am," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I need my own space. I've saved up enough to manage." The argument that followed was brutal. Accusations were thrown about how ungrateful I was, how I was just trying to get away from my responsibilities at home. My stepdad even tried to guilt me about leaving my little brother behind. "He looks up to you, he said, as if that was enough reason for me to stay in a situation that was making me miserable. But I stood my ground. This wasn't just about wanting my own space, it was about needing it for my mental and emotional health. I packed my things over the next few days, each item I put into a box feeling like a tiny piece of the fortress I was building around myself. The day I moved out, my mom came to my room. I was expecting another argument, but instead she helped me pack. We didn't talk much, but when we did, it was superficial. "Do you need more boxes?" Or, "I can give you some of the old kitchen stuff." It was like if we stayed on safe topics, we could avoid the massive elephant in the room. When I finally closed the door to my new apartment after moving everything in, I felt a wave of so many emotions. Relief, sadness, excitement, fear. I was on my own now, truly on my own. It was terrifying, but it was also freeing. Those first few nights were the hardest. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty. I missed even the annoying noises of my family home. Well, sort of. But as days turned into weeks, I started to appreciate the peace. I could come and go as I pleased. Eat when I wanted, sleep without being disturbed. It was like discovering a new part of myself that I had kept muted for so long. Life away from home settled into a routine pretty quickly, and honestly, it was the most peace I'd had in years. My relationship with my mom and stepdad wasn't great, but it was manageable since I wasn't under their roof 24/7. I was doing my own thing, staying busy with work and college and keeping my head down. Then, out of nowhere, my stepdad had a health scare that shook everything up. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious enough for him to start thinking about the future. specifically his will. I heard about it through my mom, who called one evening sounding a bit more somber than usual. Your stepdad's been thinking about his will, she said, as casually as one might talk about the weather. He wants to make sure everything is in order. Okay, I replied, unsure where this was going. The tone in her voice hinted it wasn't just a courtesy call to keep me in the loop. She hesitated, then continued. He's decided to include your stepbrother and your half-brother, but not you. He feels it makes more sense since they're his biological kids. There it was. The sting. Not that I was expecting anything, but hearing it laid out so bluntly was a gut punch. It wasn't the money or the potential inheritance that hurt. It was the clear message that I was an outsider in the family I'd spent over 5 years trying to fit into. I see, I managed, keeping my voice neutral. Thanks for letting me know. Mom must have sensed my hurt because she quickly added, It's just legal stuff, you know? Doesn't change how we feel about you. Right, I said, not really believing her. The conversation awkwardly drifted to other topics before ending, but the damage was done. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that familiar ache of not belonging. The weeks that followed were tough. I mulled over the conversation again and again. Part of me wanted to confront my stepdad, demand an explanation, or at least tell him how much he'd hurt me. But another part of me wondered why I even cared. I hadn't felt like a part of their family for years. Why was this any different? I decided to pull back, limit my visits even more. It was a defense mechanism, I guess, protecting myself from being hurt further by people who had already shown they didn't consider me family when it really counted. Then, the actual wake-up call came. It wasn't a dramatic event. No yelling matches or tearful showdowns. It was quieter than that, more profound. I was at a coffee shop, working on a term paper, when I overheard a group at the next table. They were laughing, sharing stories about their families, the usual ups and downs, normal stuff. And it hit me. I didn't have that. I hadn't had it for a long time, if ever. That realization sparked something in me. I started to question why I was allowing myself to be upset over being excluded from a will when I had already been excluded from the family in every way that mattered. It wasn't about the money. It was about wanting to feel valued and loved by the people who were supposed to be my family. From then on, I made a conscious decision to focus on the relationships in my life that did make me feel valued. Friends who had become like family, professors who mentored me, colleagues who respected me. I invested more in those connections, and gradually the hurt from my stepdad's will and the feeling of exclusion from my family began to fade. It wasn't an overnight change. There were still moments of bitterness, especially during family gatherings when I'd see my stepbrother and half-brother getting all the attention. But I was learning to accept that some things were out of my control, and where I could, I was building my own sense of family and belonging. The real test came when my stepdad's health scare passed, and life returned to normal for them. I was invited over for a family dinner, a celebration of sorts that he was doing better. I went, more out of a sense of obligation than anything else. The dinner was as awkward as I expected. My stepdad talked about his recovery. Everyone cooed over my half-brother's latest school achievements, and my stepbrother bragged about a new job. I sat there, mostly quiet, and it was clear I was the odd one out. But this time, it didn't hurt as much. I had reached a place of peace with my role in this family. I was the outsider, and that was okay because outside that house, I had people who cared about me for me, not for what I could bring to a will or a family name. After dinner, I left early, making some excuse about an early morning. As I drove home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was okay, really okay, for the first time in years. I had faced the reality of my situation, dealt with the emotional fallout, and come out the other side stronger and more self-assured. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that life has a funny way of throwing you surprises when you least expect it. After getting comfortable in my own routine and accepting the limited, if not strained, relationship with my family, I got a call one afternoon that turned everything on its head. The call was from a lawyer, someone I'd never heard of before, who introduced himself in a formal, almost apologetic tone. He asked if I had a few minutes to discuss the estate of my grand aunt, my dad's mother's sister. Honestly, I barely remembered her. She was one of those relatives you hear about in stories from your parents, but don't really know. She had no children of her own, and I remembered her being mentioned as someone who helped raise my dad. I'm calling to inform you that your grand aunt passed away recently, the lawyer continued, his voice a mixture of professional and sympathetic. And she left her entire estate to you. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for her passing, confusion about why she chose me, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility about what was coming next. The lawyer explained that my grand aunt had been quite well off, having invested wisely over her lifetime. She left behind a sizable estate, including a trust fund that was now mine, totaling around $3 million. Just like that, my financial situation changed overnight. After the call, I sat there, phone in hand, trying to process the news. Why me? We weren't close. I visited her a few times, sure, but those visits were more about checking in on an elderly relative than bonding. She must have seen something in me, maybe a reflection of her own independence, or perhaps it was her way of reaching back to family one last time. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings with the lawyer, signing documents, and learning exactly what I had inherited. It wasn't just money. There were properties, stocks, and a few personal items that had sentimental value. Among them was a letter she had written, explaining her decision. She admired my independence and determination, something she said reminded her of herself at my age. Equipped with this new wealth, I made some immediate changes. I bought a house, something I never thought I'd be able to afford on my own so soon. It was a modest place, but it was mine, and it represented a new chapter in my life. I also invested in a rental property, thinking ahead about long-term financial security. The rest of the money I put into savings and investments, consulting with a financial advisor to make sure I was making smart choices. But with great wealth comes great responsibility, and as I soon found out, great drama. I hadn't told anyone in my family about the inheritance, wanting to avoid any potential fallout. However, secrets have a way of coming out, and this one was no different. It started with my cousin, who somehow got wind of the inheritance through mutual connections in the legal world. Before I knew it, my mom knew, and once she knew, it wasn't long before everyone else did too. Phone calls started coming in, not just from her, but from my stepdad, my stepbrother, and even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone seemed to have a reason why they needed a piece of my inheritance. Times are tough, they'd say, or, you know how bad his health has been, referring to my stepdad. It was as if they all suddenly remembered I existed, but only as a bank. I was bombarded with requests for loans, gifts, and outright demands for money. It felt like I was watching vultures circling, each waiting for their chance to swoop in. The pressure was immense, and for a moment I faltered, wondering if I was being selfish by holding on to the inheritance. But then I remembered the years of feeling like an outsider in my own family. The years of scrimping and saving, working hard for every dime and getting myself through college without their help. This was my chance to secure my future, and I wasn't going to let guilt or manipulation sway me. When my mom asked directly why I hadn't thought to share the news with her, I had enough. I explained calmly but firmly that the distance between us wasn't just physical, but emotional. Her decisions, and by extension those of my stepdad and stepbrother, had shown me where I stood with them. The inheritance was a chance for me to do things on my terms, without relying on anyone else. It's my life, I told her, and I need to live it my way. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but I have to do what's best for me now. The fallout from that conversation was as expected. Accusations of being ungrateful and selfish were thrown my way, but I held my ground. Over time, the calls became less frequent, and the requests for money dried up as they realized I wasn't budging. It was a tough lesson in who my real family was. It wasn't defined by blood or marriage, but by the people who supported me without expecting anything in return. Those were the relationships I valued and continued to nurture. As for the inheritance, it remained a bittersweet reminder of my grand aunt, a woman I wish I had known better. Her final gift was not just the wealth she left me, but the clarity and conviction to stand up for myself, no matter the cost. The inheritance was supposed to be a blessing, a windfall from a distant relative who thought I might do something good with it. But as soon as word got out that I was suddenly a few million richer, it felt more like I'd painted a target on my back rather than received a gift. After I made it clear to my mom and the rest of the family that I wasn't going to hand out cash just because we shared some DNA, things got chilly. Fast. The phone calls and texts that were initially filled with thinly veiled hints for money turned into outright pleas, and then into angry demands when I held firm on my decision to keep my finances private. It wasn't just the immediate family either. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly very interested in reconnecting. I received messages like, "Hey, just heard about Aunt so-and-so, so sorry to hear she passed, but also could you help me with some money? Times are tough." It was like they all had the same script, only the names were changed. One of the toughest calls was from my stepdad. He'd never been warm, but now he was cold and calculating. "You know, we've always considered you part of this family. It's only right you think of your brothers in this difficult time," he said one day, his voice dripping with a guilt-trip glaze. My brothers haven't considered me family unless they needed something, I shot back, surprising even myself with the sharpness of my tone. That's a harsh way to put it, he retorted, but I could tell he was taken aback. I had never spoken to him like that before. I had always been the compliant stepchild, the one who didn't rock the boat too much. The conversation spiraled from there, with him accusing me of being selfish and me reminding him of all the times I'd felt excluded and unimportant in his family. By the end, we were both too angry to see any reason, and the call ended with a mutual understanding that things between us would never be the same. The final straw came when my mom tried to mediate, which really meant taking my stepdad's side and trying to convince me to share my inheritance. It's what families do, she insisted during one particularly tense visit where she'd shown up unannounced at my new house. Families also support each other, I countered, feeling both exhausted and exasperated. When have you ever supported me like this, emotionally or financially? She was silent, unable to answer. The truth was, our relationship had been superficial at best for years. This money had just brought all the underlying issues to the surface. After she left, the calls and messages slowed, then stopped. It seemed they had finally accepted that I wasn't going to cave. It was a relief, but also a profound disappointment. It hurt to know that my value to them was tied so closely to what I could provide financially. In the wake of the family fallout, I began to invest more time in my relationships with friends and colleagues, people who appreciated me for who I was, not for my bank account. I also started volunteering, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the resources or time for before. Giving back on my own terms was healing in a way I hadn't expected. It helped me connect with people, build new friendships, and fill the void left by my family's conditional affection. I also saw a therapist who helped me work through the feelings of betrayal and abandonment that had resurfaced with this whole ordeal. It was tough, unpacking years of emotional baggage, but it was necessary. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize the signs of manipulative behavior, and most importantly, to value my own needs and well-being. One day, I decided to write a letter to each family member who had tried to pressure me for money. In each letter, I explained my feelings, why I had made the decisions I did, and how their actions had affected me. It was more for my closure than anything. I didn't expect any responses. To my surprise, my half-brother replied. He was young, only 14, and his letter was clumsy, but sincere. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. We started texting, small conversations about school and his hobbies. It wasn't much, but it was something, a possible bridge to rebuilding at least one family connection. Update 1. Hey everyone, just wanted to update you all on what's been going on since I last posted. It's been a few weeks, and honestly, I wish I could say things have gotten better, but they've actually gone from bad to much worse. I appreciate all the support and advice you guys have given me. It's been a lifeline during this crazy time. So, after everything blew up with my family, my mom reached out to me in August wanting to talk. Given everything that's happened, I had a pretty strong hunch that this wasn't going to be a simple catch-up. To keep things somewhat neutral, we decided to meet at a public place. I figured that might keep the drama to a minimum, or at least keep things from getting too crazy. The meetup was awkward from the get-go. My mom kicked things off by talking about how they've been struggling financially. She mentioned my half-brother's private school fees have become a burden since my stepdad got sick and had his work hours cut. Then she shifted to talking about how they've been wanting to renovate the house and how she desperately needs a vacation to get away from the mental toll of everything. Throughout all this, she didn't ask a single question about my life or how I've been coping. It was like I was just there to listen to her list of problems. I was getting more and more uncomfortable as the conversation dragged on, feeling like I was just a spectator to her woes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and asked her to just get to the point. Without missing a beat, she said she expected me to write her a check for $1 million. Yes, you read that right, $1 million. She claimed that, technically, it should all be her money since it came from her late husband's inheritance. But she was being generous by only asking for a third. Her demands were growing more and more outlandish, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I quickly paid the bill and got out of there as fast as I could. Since that day, my mom has been going around calling me a thief, loudly proclaiming to anyone who will listen that the inheritance should have been hers in the first place. Meanwhile, my stepdad sent me a massive wall of text, lecturing me about how I can't just think of myself when I'm part of a bigger family, and that my decisions should be inclusive of everyone else. I reminded him pointedly how he didn't include me in his will because I wasn't family enough. That seemed to shut him up temporarily, but I doubt it's the end of it. Things have spiraled into absolute madness since then. Both my mom and stepdad have been bad-mouthing me all over the place, and I'm honestly a bit scared about what they might do next. It feels like they're trying to turn everyone against me, painting me as the bad guy in a situation they've blown way out of proportion. I'm trying to stay strong and keep a level head. But it's tough when it feels like the people who are supposed to support you are out to make your life harder. I'll keep you all updated if anything changes. But right now, it's just one big mess. Thanks again for all your support and advice. It really helps to know there are people out there who understand and care. Update 2. Hey everyone, dropping in again for a big update. Trust me, it's been a whirlwind these past few weeks, and honestly, I'm just trying to keep my head above water with all the crazy stuff that's been happening. I really appreciate all the support and advice you all have been throwing my way. It's been a huge help in navigating this chaos, so thank you a ton. So, here's the scoop. A few weeks back, out of nowhere, I get this super official looking letter in the mail. It's from some lawyer I've never heard of, claiming that my mom is suing me for a huge chunk of my inheritance. Yeah, you heard that right. My own mom, suing me. My initial reaction? Full-blown panic. I mean, who wouldn't freak out? My mind was racing, thinking about all the legal battles I'd have to face. But then, just when I thought it couldn't get any more soap opera worthy, my stepdad sends me this ominous text. He's all like, "You'll regret not sharing your money because now we're going to take you for everything you're worth." It was like something out of a bad movie, the villainous step-parent twisting the knife. Seriously, the audacity had my jaw on the floor. Rattled, but not beaten, I sent everything over to my attorney, expecting a whole ordeal. But get this, my attorney literally laughed when he read the letter. Not just a chuckle, but a full-on, "Are you kidding me?" kind of laugh. He tossed the letter into the trash and told me not to lose any sleep over it. According to him, my grandaunt's will is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. There's no way my mom can touch anything legally because she isn't even a descendant, and the will spells out the beneficiaries clear as day. But because my attorney is the thorough kind of guy he is, he didn't stop there. He dug a bit deeper into this so-called lawyer who sent the letter. Turns out, the office address listed is some rundown building that looks like it hasn't seen a tenant in years, and the phone number? Disconnected. No longer in service. Looks like my parents got desperate and decided to hire some fly-by-night, probably not even legit lawyer in a last-ditch effort to scare me into coughing up some cash. Realizing they were just trying to bluff me into surrendering part of my inheritance was both a relief and a wake-up call. They actually thought they could strong-arm me with some half-baked legal threat. The nerve, right? Knowing this, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I mean, I was gearing up for a legal showdown. But now? I'm just shaking my head at the lengths they'd go to. So with that drama sort of deflated, I decided I needed a break from all the madness. I've been on edge, losing sleep, and just generally stressed out. I talked it over with my buddies, and we all agreed. It's time for a little getaway. So I'm taking some time off work to go traveling with my friends next week. Nothing fancy, just a road trip to some places we've always talked about visiting but never got around to. I think a change of scenery is exactly what I need to clear my head and recharge. It's weird, though, thinking about how things have unfolded. I used to look up to my mom and stepdad, you know? And now, seeing how they've acted, it's disappointing. But I'm learning that sometimes you have to step back from the people who are supposed to support you when they start pulling you down instead. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to this trip. A bit of adventure, some good laughs, and quality time with friends. Just what the doctor ordered to get away from the family drama. I'll keep you all posted on how it goes, and if anything else pops up on the home front. But for now, I'm focusing on the positive, on moving forward and not letting this whole mess drag me down anymore. Thanks again for all the support and advice. This community has been my rock through this storm, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate every comment, every message of encouragement. You guys are the best. Here's to better days ahead, right? Catch you all after my trip, hopefully with some fun stories and zero drama. Story 6. This story is titled, "My Parents Refused to Help Me Pay for Life-Saving Surgery, Choosing My Sister's Wedding Instead. Now they're begging me to save them from losing everything." Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one. I've been sitting on this story for a while, but after what went down last week, I need to get this shit off my chest. Fair warning, this isn't some feel-good family reconciliation story. This is about karma finally catching up to people who deserve it. So I 33 male, and I've spent the last 17 years of my life working construction. Started from the absolute bottom. We're talking pushing wheelbarrows full of concrete in 95-degree heat, hauling lumber up 3 flights of stairs kind of bottom. Now I run my own crews as a site supervisor, but we'll get to that part later. First, you need to understand where I came from, because that's what makes all this so fucked up. Growing up in our house was like living in some twisted parallel universe, where I was basically a ghost, while my younger sister Emma was treated like she'd discovered the cure for cancer every time she learned a new dance move. I'm not even exaggerating here. Our house looked like some kind of Emma shrine. Every wall, every shelf, every flat surface had some trophy, certificate, or photo of her achievements. Ballet recitals, piano competitions, spelling bee participation awards, you name it. It was displayed like a precious artifact in a museum. Me? I had exactly one photo in the house. One. It was from my high school graduation, tucked away in some dusty album that probably hasn't seen daylight since Obama's first term. And it's not like I was some deadbeat kid. I lettered in football and wrestling, maintained a solid B+ average while working part-time, never got in trouble with the law. But in my parents' eyes, that was just expected. No praise, no celebration, just a nod, and maybe a good job if they were feeling particularly generous that day. I started hitting the weights hard in sophomore year, partly cause of football, but mostly cause I needed somewhere to put all that anger. The gym became my sanctuary. While Emma was getting private piano lessons and dance tutorials, I was in our garage with a rusty bench press and some secondhand dumbbells I bought with my own money from mowing lawns. My old man never once spotted me, never showed any interest in what I was doing. He was too busy videotaping Emma's dance performances or whatever. You know what really gets me? I can count on one hand the number of times my parents showed up to my wrestling matches. 3. Out of 4 years of varsity competition, they always had some excuse. Emma had a recital, Emma had a competition, Emma needed help with her homework. I won the state championship in my weight class senior year. Neither of them was there. Why? Emma had an audition for some summer dance program she ended up quitting after 2 weeks anyway. By the time I hit 16, I was already working construction during summer breaks. Not because I had to, we weren't poor or anything. My old man had some cushy office job in management, and mom worked part-time as a real estate agent. Nah, I worked because I wanted to be anywhere but home. The guys on the site became more of a family to me than my actual family. They taught me everything. How to read blueprints, how to operate machinery, how to tell when someone's trying to cut corners that could get people killed. Most importantly, they taught me what it means to have someone's back. I moved out the day after high school graduation, got a full-time position with the construction company I'd been working summers for, rented a tiny studio apartment that barely fit a bed and a mini fridge. My parents barely noticed. They were too busy planning Emma's Sweet 16 party, which, by the way, cost more than my first year's rent. The next few years, I busted my ass learning everything I could about construction. Started as a laborer, moved up to carpenter's assistant, then carpenter, then lead carpenter. By 25, I was running my own crew. The guys respected me because they knew I'd done every job I was asking them to do. I wasn't some college boy with a clipboard telling them how to work. I was right there in the trenches with them, getting just as dirty, lifting just as heavy. Meanwhile, Emma went off to some expensive private college. Guess who paid for that? Changed her major 3 times, and finally settled on communications or marketing or some other bullshit degree. Every time she came home, it was like the second coming of Christ. Mom would cook these elaborate meals. Dad would clear his schedule to spend quality time with her. Me? I got a text on my birthday if they remembered. But you know what? All that shit made me stronger. Every ignored achievement, every missed match, every time they chose her over me, it all just fueled the fire. I turned that anger into gains at the gym, into focus at work, into drive to succeed despite them. Not because of them. By the time everything went sideways with my health, I was benching 315 for reps, deadlifting 500, and running crews that finished projects ahead of schedule and under budget. So there I was at 28, crushing it at work, hitting new PRs at the gym every month, and finally feeling like I had my shit together. I'd worked my way up to site supervisor at one of the biggest construction companies in the area. Had my own apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Was even thinking about maybe starting my own business down the line. Then life decided to remind me it's got a mean right hook. It started with this weird pain in my chest. Not like heartburn or muscle strain. This was different. At first, I brushed it off. You work construction long enough, random aches and pains become like background noise. Plus, I was that typical meathead who thought being tough meant ignoring when your body's trying to tell you something's wrong. Fucking stupid looking back on it. The real wake-up call came during a deadlift session. I was going for a new PR, 525 pounds. Everything felt solid during warm-ups. But as soon as I started pulling that weight, it felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was tightening it with every breath. Had to bail on the lift. Me, the guy who once finished a wrestling match with a dislocated shoulder, had to drop the bar and sit down because I couldn't fucking breathe. My buddy Mark from the crew, same guy who taught me everything I know about concrete work, practically dragged my stubborn ass to the ER. Thought it was just going to be some pulled muscle or maybe a pinched nerve. Nope. After what felt like a million tests and scans, Doc comes in with that look on his face. You know the one, where they're trying to stay professional, but you can tell they're about to drop a bomb on you. Turns out I had this tumor pressing against my lung. Not the kind they can just cut out and be done with it either. We're talking major surgery, followed by treatments that sounded like they came straight out of a sci-fi movie. The kind of shit that makes you realize all those hours in the gym, all that protein powder and creatine, don't mean jack when your own body decides to turn against you. But here's the real kicker. The cost. Remember how I mentioned I was doing well at work? Yeah, well, construction companies aren't exactly known for their amazing benefits packages. No health insurance. And being the young, invincible dumbass I was, I hadn't bothered getting private coverage. Why waste money on insurance when I could spend it on supplements and new lifting gear, right? God, I was so fucking stupid. The numbers the hospital threw at me might as well have been in Monopoly money. Surgery alone was going to cost more than I made in 2 years. Then add in all the treatments, medications with names I couldn't even pronounce, follow-up care. We're talking enough money to buy a house in some states. And they wanted it up front, or at least proof I could pay. Welcome to American healthcare, right? I tried everything I could think of first. Called every insurance company, but pre-existing conditions were still a bitch back then. Looked into medical trials, but none were accepting new patients. Even checked out those medical tourism websites about getting treatment in Mexico or India, but the doctor shot that down real quick. Said I needed to start treatment like yesterday. My crew, man. Those guys were amazing. Mark started a GoFundMe right away. The other guys were offering to donate vacation days, sick leave, whatever they could. Even the old-timer who'd been busting my balls since day one about being too pretty for construction, because I actually wore sunscreen, fuck skin cancer, came by with an envelope full of cash he'd been saving for a new Harley. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. The numbers were just too big. We're talking 6 figures here. And time wasn't on my side. Every day I waited, this thing in my chest was growing, making it harder to breathe, harder to work, harder to even get through a normal day without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. Lost 15 pounds in the first month, just from stress and not being able to eat right. Had to drop down to light duty at work because I couldn't handle the heavy lifting anymore. Every breath felt like I was trying to suck air through a coffee stirrer. Nights were the worst. Lying there in the dark, feeling this thing inside me, wondering if each breath might be the one where my lung finally gives out. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. After years of being the independent one, the one who never needed help, the one who'd built everything from scratch, I had to swallow my pride and go ask my parents for help. They weren't rich, but they had savings, good credit, a paid-off house. Plus, they were my fucking parents. The people who are supposed to have your back when shit hits the fan. It was a Tuesday evening when I drove to my parents' house. Remember that clearly because I'd just gotten my latest test results that morning, and the doc was pushing hard for us to schedule the surgery ASAP. I'd lost another 10 pounds that month. My work jeans were hanging off me like I was some teenager trying to look cool. Chest pain was getting worse, to the point where I had to take breaks walking up a single flight of stairs. Their house looked exactly the same as it always had. Real estate prices in their neighborhood had doubled since they bought the place. They were sitting on at least $500,000 in equity alone. I sat down in the chair across from them, trying to ignore how my chest felt like it was in a vice grip. Started explaining everything. The diagnosis, the timeline, the costs. Showed them all the paperwork from the hospital, the treatment plans, everything. Even had a letter from my doctor explaining how urgent this was. My hands were shaking the whole time, but not from the illness. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, asking them for help. You know what they did while I was laying all this out? Mom kept glancing at her phone, like she was waiting for a more important call. Dad just sat there with his arms crossed. That same look on his face he used to get when I'd tell him about my wrestling matches, like he was tolerating an annoying sales pitch. When I finally finished talking, there was this long silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl. Then Mom and Dad did this thing they always did, this little look between them, like they were having a whole conversation without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and dropped the bomb. We can't help you with that, Jake. We've already committed our savings to Emma's wedding. I thought I'd misheard him at first, like maybe the tumor had spread to my brain or something. But nope, he just sat there, looking at me like he'd told me they couldn't lend me 20 bucks for gas. The wedding? I remember my voice cracking. Not from emotion, from straight up disbelief. You're choosing a fucking party over my life? Mom jumped in then, all smooth and calm like she was explaining something to a child. It's not just a party, Jake. This is Emma's special day. We've already put down non-refundable deposits. The venue alone was $30,000. $30,000 for a venue. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there literally dying, needing surgery that could save my life, and they're worried about their precious Emma's Instagram perfect wedding. I could die without this surgery. I said it slow, making sure they understood exactly what they were doing. This isn't me asking for help buying a car or starting a business. This is life or death. Dad actually had the balls to shrug, like he was dismissing a waiter who'd brought him the wrong appetizer. You've always been resourceful, Jake. You'll figure something out. This is Emma's time. We can't let her down. That's when it hit me. All those years of being the forgotten son, all those missed events, all those times they chose her over me. It wasn't just them being busy or distracted. They genuinely valued her happiness over my life. Their son could literally die, and they were more concerned about their daughter having the perfect wedding photos. I got up to leave, my legs barely holding me up. Mom actually had the nerve to say, "Don't be dramatic, Jake. There must be some payment plan you can work out with the hospital." Payment plan? Like I was buying a fucking dishwasher or something. The last thing I remember before walking out was looking at that wall of Emma's photos. All those smiling faces, all that money spent making sure their precious daughter had everything perfect. And there I was, their son, walking out of their house knowing I meant less to them than a party. That was the last time I spoke to them for almost 5 years. The next few months after my parents chose a fucking wedding over their son's life were pure hell. Not the metaphorical kind. I'm talking actual, physical, wondering if you'll wake up tomorrow kind of hell. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, you've got nothing left to lose. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need to find out who you really are. First thing I did after leaving their house was drive straight to work. It was already dark, but I knew Mark would still be there finishing paperwork. Guy's been running night crew for 15 years. Found him in the site office, doing what he always does, cursing at Excel spreadsheets and drinking coffee that could strip paint. Told him everything. Not gonna lie, broke down halfway through. Here I am, 6 feet 2 inches, 220 pounds. Well, more like 190 by then. Crying like a baby in a construction trailer. Know what Mark did? Didn't say a word. Just got up, locked the office door. Then he picked up his phone and started making calls. By midnight, we had a plan. Not a good one, but when you're drowning, you don't complain about the quality of the rope. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital payment negotiations, loan applications, and picking up every extra shift I could physically handle. The crew, my real family, stepped up in ways I still can't talk about without getting choked up. These guys, most of them living paycheck to paycheck themselves, somehow scraped together almost $15,000 for my treatment fund. Miguel, our master carpenter, who'd been sending half his paycheck to family in Mexico, handed me an envelope with $2,000 in cash. Said his kids could wait another year for their PlayStation. Big Pete, who everyone thought was just a stereotypical muscle-head concrete specialist, turned out to be a whiz at organizing fundraisers. Man got the local gym to host a bench press competition, convinced local businesses to donate prizes, raised another $8,000 in one weekend. But it still wasn't enough. Not even close. The surgery alone was going to cost over $80,000, and that's before adding in all the other treatments. So I did what I had to do. Sold my truck, the one I'd spent 2 years restoring on weekends. Sold my custom gaming PC. Sold every piece of gym equipment I owned. Even sold my grandfather's watch. The only thing he'd ever left me. That one hurt the most. Meanwhile, I was still trying to work as much as possible, even though by this point I could barely make it through a 4-hour shift without feeling like I was breathing through a straw. The tumor was growing, pressing harder against my lung. Every breath felt like trying to inflate a balloon inside a box that's too small. Lost another 15 pounds. My work boots stopped fitting because my feet were swelling from the fluid retention. The worst part? Seeing Emma's wedding preparations all over social media. My parents were posting constant updates about venue tastings, flower arrangements, dress fittings. Each post was like a knife in the gut. The flower budget alone could have covered one of my chemotherapy sessions. The designer dress they bought her probably cost enough to pay for my first round of treatment. Then came the wedding invitations. Well, not to me, obviously. I heard about them from a cousin who still talked to me. Apparently, they were these elaborate things with gold foil and custom calligraphy. Cost like $15 per piece. They ordered 200 of them. Do the math on that one. 3 grand on fucking paper that most people would throw away, while their son was working security shifts at a warehouse between his regular job, barely able to breathe. But here's where the story takes a turn you might not expect. Remember that GoFundMe that Mark started? It caught the attention of one of our suppliers, big commercial construction materials company. Their CEO had lost his brother to the same type of cancer I had. Guy calls me personally one morning, says he wants to help. Next thing I know, they're offering to cover 40% of my medical costs through their corporate charitable foundation. That was the break I needed. Between that, the loans I'd taken out, everything I'd sold, and what the crew had raised, I finally had enough to schedule the surgery. Had to drain my 401k, max out 3 credit cards, and sign up for a payment plan that'd take years to pay off. But I was going to live. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days before Emma's wedding. Not that they knew or cared. They were too busy with final dress fittings and rehearsal dinners. I went into that operating room alone. Well, not really alone. Mark took the day off to drive me there. Miguel's wife made me a care package of homemade tamales for after the surgery. Big Pete organized the crew to cover all my shifts for the next month. You want to know true family? It's not the people who share your DNA. It's the guys who work overtime so you can make rent while you're recovering. It's the rough-handed carpenter who sits in a hospital waiting room for 12 hours straight just so you don't wake up alone. It's the crew that passes around a hard hat collecting dollars and quarters because every bit helps. I made it through the surgery, spent 2 weeks in the hospital, another month recovering at home. The crew took turns checking on me, bringing food, helping with basic stuff I couldn't do while I was healing. Not once did my phone ring with a call from my parents or Emma. They were probably too busy posting wedding photos on Instagram. Recovery was a bitch. Anyone who's been through major surgery knows what I'm talking about. That feeling where even breathing feels like you're learning a new skill. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. Once you start climbing back up, you realize just how strong you really are. And man, did I climb. The first few months were rough. Lost most of my muscle mass, couldn't lift more than a gallon of milk without feeling like my chest was going to explode. But you know what? Every morning I woke up breathing was a middle finger to the people who'd left me for dead. Started small, walking to the mailbox, then around the block, then actual cardio. Rebuilt myself one painful step at a time. Mark and the crew kept me on light duty, mostly supervising and doing paperwork. Wasn't much, but it kept me in the game. Started learning the business side of construction. Contracts, bidding, project management. Turns out when you can't lift heavy shit anymore, your brain starts working overtime. Who knew? About a year after the surgery, I got an unexpected call from that CEO who'd helped with my medical bills. Guy wanted to meet for coffee. Figured he was just checking up on his investment, making sure I hadn't died or whatever. Nope. Turns out he'd been watching how I handled everything. The recovery, the work, the crew management. Offered me a position as a project manager for their commercial division. Better pay, full benefits. Fucking finally. And most importantly, a chance to learn how the big boys play. Took that opportunity and ran with it like I was being chased. Spent the next few years absorbing everything I could about commercial construction. Nights, weekends, didn't matter. While Emma was posting about her perfect suburban life and my parents were bragging about their country club membership, I was building something real. Started small at first, took some of the smaller projects nobody else wanted. You know, the ones where the margins are tight and you gotta get creative. Learned every trick in the book about maximizing efficiency without cutting corners. My crews loved me because I'd actually been in their boots. Known what it's like to bust your ass in 100-degree heat for minimum wage. By year 3, I was handling multi-million-dollar projects. Remember that tumor that nearly killed me? Used that experience to specialize in medical facility construction. Turns out hospitals love working with someone who understands their world from both sides. Started making connections, building relationships, the kind of networking you can't fake because it comes from shared experience. Then I got the project that changed everything, a $50 million medical center renovation. Biggest job I'd ever managed. Spent 6 months planning it down to the smallest detail. The project was a massive success. Came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Got written up in some industry magazines, won a few awards. Suddenly, I wasn't just some construction guy anymore. I was an innovative voice in medical facility design, or some shit like that. Started getting calls from other healthcare systems wanting to work with us. Meanwhile, life at home got better too. Met Sarah at a supplier conference, She runs a commercial electrical contracting company. First woman I'd ever met who could talk about load-bearing calculations and still make me laugh so hard my chest hurt. In a good way this time. Got married last year. Small ceremony, just close friends and my real family, the crew. Everything was going great. Then about 6 months ago, I started hearing rumors through the industry grapevine. Remember that fancy country club my parents were so proud of belonging to? Turns out Dad had gotten involved in some real estate investment scheme with some other members. You know the type. Promise huge returns, minimal risk, all that bullshit. Only this time, it wasn't just their membership dues they'd invested. They'd mortgaged their house, cashed out their retirement accounts, the whole 9 yards. First sign something was wrong came when they suddenly started selling off their toys. Dad's precious golf club membership, gone. Mom's brand new luxury SUV, traded in for a used Honda. Their regular spots at all the charity galas and social events, mysteriously empty. But the real shit didn't hit the fan until last month. Got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Almost didn't answer it. Was in the middle of reviewing bids for a new project. Wish I'd let it go to voicemail. It was my mother's voice, sounding small and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Jake, we need to talk. It's important. That phone call from my mother? Turns out their small financial trouble was more like the Titanic after meeting that iceberg. The investment scheme Dad got involved with wasn't just bad. It was catastrophically, criminally bad. Like FBI investigating the whole thing bad. They'd sunk everything they had into it. Their retirement savings, their home equity, even took out additional loans using their house as collateral. All gone. But here's where it gets interesting. Their first move wasn't to call their precious Emma, their golden child, their perfect daughter, the one they'd chosen over my literal survival. Nope. They called me. The forgotten son. The one they'd left to rot when he needed them most. Because Emma? She'd already turned them down. Hard. See, about a week before they called me, they'd shown up at Emma's McMansion in her fancy gated community. The same house they'd helped her and her lawyer husband buy, with a massive down payment, while I was still paying off my medical bills, by the way. They'd packed up some suitcases, thinking they could just move in with their precious daughter until things sorted themselves out. Want to know what their perfect princess did? Had her husband answer the door? This guy, this corporate lawyer who'd spent the last 5 years kissing their asses at every family gathering, looks them dead in the eye and says, "We can't risk having your financial problems affect our children's future." Then he hands them a business card for a bankruptcy attorney and closes the door. In their faces. While Emma watched from the window, the same daughter they'd spent hundreds of thousands on, private school, dance lessons, college, that ridiculous wedding, wouldn't even let them sleep on her couch. The same parents who'd chosen her wedding over their son's life were now standing on her doorstep with nowhere to go, and she treated them like door-to-door salesmen. Mom told me all this through tears when she finally broke down and called me. Not because she felt bad about what they'd done to me. No, she was just desperate. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. Dad's precious Mercedes had already been repossessed. All their friends from the country club had suddenly stopped returning their calls. "We don't know what to do, Jake," she sobbed into the phone. "We've tried everything. We need help." I sat there in my office, my nice big corner office with a view of the city, listening to her cry. The same woman who'd sat there stone-faced when I told her I might die without surgery was now breaking down because they might lose their house. "How much do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Professional. Like I was talking to a subcontractor who'd screwed up a bid. 50,000, she whispered. "Just to catch up on the mortgage and hold off the foreclosure. We can figure out the rest later." 50,000. The exact amount they'd spent on Emma's wedding photographer and videographer. I remember seeing the photos. They'd hired some famous Instagram guy who usually did celebrity weddings. Got a whole team of videographers too, with drones and everything. Real artistic shit. "What does Emma say about all this?" I asked, even though I already knew. There was a long pause. She says they're investing in their children's future, that they can't risk their financial stability. "But Jake, we're your parents. We raised you. I cut her off. "Like you raised me when I needed surgery? When I was literally fighting for my life?" "That was different," she snapped, sudden anger replacing the tears. "That was an emergency. We had commitments." "An emergency?" I felt my voice rising. "I could have died, Mom. Actually died. But you had commitments to Emma's wedding. And now you're calling me because she won't help you?" That's when Dad got on the phone, still trying to sound authoritative, like he had any power left in this situation. "Now listen here, son. What's past is past. We need to think about the future. About family. Family. There was that word again. The same one they'd thrown around when they needed something, but conveniently forgot when I was the one in need. Tell me something, Dad, I said, leaning back in my chair. When Emma turned you away, when her husband handed you that bankruptcy attorney's card, did it hurt? Did it feel like someone had ripped your heart out? Like the person you'd given everything to just didn't care if you lived or died? The silence on the other end was deafening. The morning after that phone call from my parents, I had a lot to think about. Spent a few hours in my home gym, the one Sarah and I had built in our basement, not really working out, just sitting there on my bench press, staring at myself in the mirror, looking at the scar on my chest from the surgery I'd had to fight for alone. The next day, I got a call from the bank handling my parents' mortgage. Turns out I was still listed as their emergency contact. Emma had demanded to be removed from all their financial documents months ago. The bank representative was very professional, explaining they were preparing for foreclosure proceedings, asked if I was in a position to help resolve the situation. I told them I'd get back to them. Had some thinking to do first. That Saturday, I drove down to my old construction site, the one where I'd started as a laborer, where Mark and the crew had saved my life. Place was different now. We were finishing up that $50 million medical center project. My project. Standing there in the morning sun, looking at this massive building that existed because I'd survived, I made my decision. Called my parents. Told them to meet me at the site. Told them to come at 7 a.m. sharp, when the day crew would be arriving. They showed up looking like hell. "Why are we here, Jake?" Mom asked, trying to sound authoritative but her voice shaking. They looked out of place in their casual luxury clothes, surrounded by men and women in work gear who were actually producing something real. I turned to face them. See this building? This whole medical center? It exists because I survived, not because of you, in spite of you. Every person who gets treatment here, every life that gets saved in this building, it's because I made it without you. Dad started to say something, but I cut him off. I brought you here because I want you to understand something. 5 years ago, I sat in your living room and begged for help. I needed $80,000 for surgery that would save my life. You chose Emma's wedding instead, a party that cost more than what I needed to survive. We've apologized for that, Mom interrupted, her voice small. We were wrong. We know that now. No, I said, my voice hard. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you need something from me now. There's a difference. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. You need $50,000 to save your house. That's less than what you spent on Emma's wedding flowers. The daughter who won't even let you sleep on her couch now. Are you going to help us or not? Dad demanded, a flash of his old arrogance showing through. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I turned to the crew, my real family. Hey, Mark. Remember when I needed surgery? When everyone here pitched in to help save my life? Mark walked over, wiping his hands on his vest. Sure do, boss. Still got the hard hat we used to collect donations. I turned back to my parents. These men, who make a fraction of what you used to make, who have their own families to support, gave everything they could to help me live. They showed me what real family means. Then I did something that felt like lifting 1,000 pounds off my chest. I smiled. The answer is no. I'm not giving you a cent. Not for the house, not for anything. Ever. Mom started crying. Dad's face went red. We're your parents. You can't just... I can. I cut him off. And I am. You know what the difference is between you and Emma? Nothing. You're exactly the same. You only care about people when they're useful to you. The moment they need something, you throw them away. I gestured to the medical center rising behind me. I built something real here. Something that helps people. While you were throwing parties and playing golf, I was creating something that matters. And I did it without you. Where are we supposed to go? Mom sobbed. We'll be homeless. I shrugged. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. Isn't that what you told me when I was dying? Started walking away then, but turned back one last time. Oh, and Dad? Remember what you said about family helping family? You were right. Family does help family. You're just not my family anymore. Left them standing there in the dust of my construction site, surrounded by the men and women who'd shown me what real family means. Went up to my office and watched through the window as they got in their beat-up Honda and drove away. That was 2 months ago. They lost the house last week. Emma's still not taking their calls. Last I heard, they're living in some extended stay motel, trying to figure out what to do next. Their country club friends have all disappeared. Their golden child wants nothing to do with them. And me? I just signed a contract for another medical center project, bigger than the last one. The crew's still with me. Every single one of them. Sarah's pregnant with our first kid. Life's good. Sometimes karma takes her time, but when she finally shows up, she makes sure to finish the job right. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. Thanks for all the awards and support. And for those asking, no, I don't regret my decision. Some bridges need to stay burned.